Remembering your oath to tell the truth, did you ever tell Donald Trump his name is in the files?
I have never spoken to President Trump about the Epstein files.
Did you ever tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files?
The Attorney General and I have had numerous discussions about the entirety of the Epstein files and the reviews conducted by our team.
Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files?
And we have released where President Trump's name is in the Epstein files.
It's a simple question. Did you tell the Attorney General that the President's name is in the Epstein files?
During many conversations that the Attorney General and I have had on the matter of Epstein, we have reviewed.
The question is simple.
Who
did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files? Yes or no?
Why don't you try spelling it out?
Yes or no, Director?
Use the alphabet.
Yes or no?
No, A, B, C,
Director,
D, E, F.
it sounds like you don't want to tell us. Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name was in the Epstein files?
Why don't you try serving your constituency by focusing on reducing violent crime in this country and the number of pedophiles that are legally harbored in your sanctuary cities in California? I'll work with you on that.
Regular order, Mr. Chairman.
I'm the lawless gentleman from California.
Did you tell the Attorney General that Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files?
The question has been asked and answered.
You've not answered it, and we will take your evasiveness as a consciousness of guilt.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Saturday, November 15th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. That clip's not new, but definitely felt it was important to talk to start with, to sort of set the table for a few different things. Interesting what's happened since that, isn't it? And the conversation point about pedophiles in this country and how relevant that is today with things like Tom Andronov, now I'm going to forget his name, the Israeli sexual offender who came to this country that was let go, or a person associated with Trump that was recently charged with a very small amount of time for soliciting. I mean, the kind of people that we would think they'd be going after are the ones that they seem to be, Epstein files, which is one of the largest focuses today. Now, not to say that there's not examples of things that they've done. I mean, that's kind of always the case, but it's about the big picture. And I think it's quite obvious today that this Epstein discussion, as we've been pointing out for a while, is really, this is the thorn in their side. And it is absolutely bringing down something that needs to come down, and that is the illusion of the party system. But we're going to start with an important conversation today that relates to FBI, Kash Patel, and we'll touch on some of his other investigations, but an important follow-up that we've talked about in, transparency, but in this particular administration, the ethics pledges that were ignored, that seemingly nobody wanted to talk about, not even the Democrats, who had every reason to call that out as a complete deviation from the norm. But more than that, with the connection to Israel and what's going on with the world, a very, very major national security risk. But of course, seeing as how they're all completely, whatever you want to call it, I would say completely influenced, if not controlled, by a foreign power, that perfectly lines up for me. But in addition to the ethics pledges that we talked about in the beginning, that never really got resolved, that nobody ever really wanted to talk about on any side, now there's another story from ProPublica of Kash Patel's FBI through Donald Trump not doing security clearances in regard to specifically polygraphs, but a few other examples, one of which happens to be Stephen Miller's right-hand man. And I think that speaks for itself. But what this opens the door to is, rather, the picture that it paints is a situation where you have an administration who is ignoring what would otherwise be the most important thing for national security. The concern for outside influence, the concern for conflicts of interest, the concern for, any kind of financial issue that would cause them to act against American interests. None of that seems to have mattered because they didn't even look into it, or they really just didn't want you to see what they found. But we'll go through why that's very important. And you know why I think that's important. But regardless of why if this is a cover up or something being hidden, regardless of why it's being hidden, it should matter to you that it's being hidden, or that they're not doing what they should be doing with people who are acting now, I think, even according to conservatives, against American interests, despite how much they yell America first. But we'll go over a few other points that relate to that topic in and of itself, some of the other FBI investigations, but we'll make a focus on, as I said, the Epstein files and where that currently is, and a couple of other overlapping parts from Israel, including the person who's now been pointed to by Bondi to investigate, who actually has very clear connections to Israeli intelligence. Now, through companies that they work with, but it's important to understand that those connections are there, and we'll go yet again make the point for why that's so obviously relevant. And this is even if the person involved isn't aware of that. It still becomes relevant because of all the strings that can be pulled by the power structures when that's the case. But we'll start with that in general. We have a lot to get to in this, but I think the overall kind of connective point between Epstein, Israel, the lack of security clearances, and what that's created within this administration, by no means is it new to the government, but to this administration, it's either that it's gotten so bad and so obvious that that something is trying to shift to get away from that awareness, or this is some sort of a toppling moment, whether maybe people are, I can open my mind to the possibility that maybe this is the white hats fighting back against the thing that's always been happening. I would certainly love that to be the case. I'd love to be wrong about that, even though, my point being, I think all the evidence that we have in the conversation very clearly points to the fact that this is something that is against at the very least, what the MAGA base expected and what they were promised. I only say it like that because it's a mixed bag when it comes to how Democrats perceive what Donald Trump is doing. And, all of these people in my mind are lost within that two-party illusion, partisanship being the most important thing for a manipulative power structure to keep you focused on anything other than what's actually happening around you. Well, let's start with a couple of points that I wanted to kind of briefly point to, just things that don't really fit into everything else, but I didn't want you to miss. This is a follow-up from yesterday's show. And this is shout out to Tinfoil Hat Girl, because this is something I'd mentioned and I hadn't had the time to really dive into, and she just took the moment to look into it. First of all, the point was about we did this show yesterday entitled Epstein is Exposing the Fake MAGAs. And that's just the broad point. It really, truly is. And really exposing fake partisans. But it was important to reach the people that I think are the majority of conservatives that are seeing this and in a lot of ways are pulling their punches, keeping quiet, self-censoring, because they don't realize that that's in fact what most people are seeing, in my opinion. But one of Israel's biggest companies is taking over U.S. real estate. Now, this is a really important point as people are calling out BlackRock, which is also important to call out, but making it about anything other than what's currently happening. And of course, also realizing that Larry Fink is completely tapped into Trump's inner circle. And so you can't call out BlackRock without making it clear that Trump is a part of that. And that's just what they're doing in the team sport politics game. But the company we're discussing and taking over, it's crazy enough, called American Landmark, a company that was called, I think, something Landmark, and then Israel's company basically bought out 90% of it, and they called it American Landmark. You know why? Very important to sell the idea this is an American apple pie company. And at the end of the day, it's Israel interest overtaking real estate in this country, basically a group that is completely invested in illegal West Bank settlements and displacing of Palestinians in Israel, now doing the same thing to Americans and displacing people in this country. Watch the show. It's wild what's happening. While people are not calling that out, who want to make it only about Democrats, for example. But on that note, Brooklyn Dad Defiant says, question. Well, first, Aaron Rappaport shares J.D. Vance's point, which we referenced before, saying a lot of young people are saying housing is way too expensive. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants, which, by the way, the number is not accurate. Best estimates by people who are being honest about this, maybe 14 million, which is still a very valid point. But why do they just dishonesty has to always be pointed out. But it says illegal immigrants who were taking houses that ought to be going to American citizens. Now, without too much thought, you may think that makes sense, but rightly so. He just shows the question. I'm not a real estate, or the question being, I'm not a real estate or banking expert. He writes, I'm also curious about J.D. Vance's claim that 30 million undocumented immigrants are buying up all the houses, even though it's not 30. Illegal immigrants buying the houses. And he says, do banks give home loans to folks who make minimum wage without even a social security number? Well, it's a very, very logical thing to think about, because probably not. Now, there's ways around this, but the idea to argue that 30 million immigrants are all buying up homes, that's why Americans can't get it, doesn't even make sense within the with the reality of the circumstance. In some cases, probably. And yes, you could argue there's political manipulation, but it's not some absolute. The reality, and the reason I'm pointing this out, is because there's something else going on in this country. This is just a very small point to tie back to what we talked about yesterday. Watch the show if you want to dive into how alarming this is. American Landmark being only one company within that. The point was that Tinfoil Hat Girl looked into it further, and they don't just own apartments. They have 5 divisions that are buying up different parts of this country. One is apartments. They have single-family homes, hotels, hospitality, loan origination, and guarantee, and private equity. And it says Blackstone just so happens to be one of their investors. If you haven't seen by now how this stuff is connected. Now, not to say that they're all in one room, rubbing their hands together with the same agenda, but at the end of the day, there's interconnected interests, all of which don't seem to be America first. And so think about this in the context where he's trying to make it about illegal immigrants, even though there's probably a part of that, to make it about Democrats and left versus right and the whole game they're playing, when in reality, there's much more going on, whether BlackRock or Israel companies, or just you being sold out to the highest bidder by a government that, whether left or right, does not care about your interests, as they've made clear our entire lives, if we just care to look. But people might want to look into an Israeli-owned company named American Landmark and how it's buying up real estate all across the United States as they scream things like this that are riddled with falsehoods. Here's the show if you want to watch it from yesterday. One other point to include that I'll reference in the later part in the show, that just to keep it in your mind, because we're going to make a couple quick points about Israel. Invasive Israeli-founded bloatware is harvesting data from Samsung users. This is a new article, okay? This is from 2025 in February. This is just one more example. Or we could bring up the NSO group discussion, or how Donald Trump is letting Pegasus and NSO come back into this country through Israel interests. These are all spyware, manipulative content. These are groups that Israel spyware group that have been exposing and monitoring journalists, civilians, and people that are doing accountability work. Whatever you think their interests are, their intent is, these are illegal actions coming from a foreign government that's at the expense of American interests. And this is just one more example of how this government is doing this all around the world. We just talked about the ex-Mossad head who said on a public podcast, now he could be lying, of course, but we have evidence to show you this is the case, that they have infiltrated equipment and technology in basically every country in the world. So again, when he says, you've all got a piece of Israel in your pocket while talking about cell phone technology, I'm of the mind that that's an open threat. An idea to say, you all know what we do. You all know what we have done because you've been a part of it. So don't cross us in this agenda of genocide. Now, you could take that as extreme all you want. The facts are on the table. I can play all the clips that make it make sense, but I doubt people will, for those that are watching the show to start out, you already know all this information. We've gone over it in depth 55 times. This is just one more example of this being found in real time in Samsung users around the world, where it turns out even when they remove it, it doesn't actually go away. And we'll get into that in a later show. But keeping this in mind, in the infiltration of, whether real estate, technology, surveillance, Palantir, it's all coming down in front of you. Now, in a quick point we'll come back to in the next show, just so you don't, right now what's going on with Gaza has not really changed, except it just keeps getting worse and more intense, and more is being taken. My point in saying it like that is because everyone's pretending like there's a ceasefire. The ones that don't want to acknowledge it. I shouldn't say everyone. The fake mainstream conversation that isn't the majority is pretending like this is over and we won, and just putting it aside. The reality is, just like we were worried, The Guardian's now reporting the U.S. is advancing a plan to permanently divide Gaza. Big shock, big surprise. All they're doing is encroaching further and further and further, just like they did in the beginning. Took Palestine, gave them some territory, then spread it out a little further, then split it in half, then took even more down to just West Bank and a small part of Gaza. That's what's been happening over the years. People just have only started paying attention. So now what they've done is doing it one more time. Now you've got the little Gaza Strip red area, and the rest of it they're taking for their control while building new things and letting settlers build little communities. It's not a secret, guys. They've been screaming. They've been wanting to do this from the very beginning. Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, even Netanyahu, even Trump in some contexts. But now this is just the reaction to Hamas and, the narrative, whatever they want it to be. Just so it's clear, aside from all of that, this is not how this is supposed to go. Israel's been verifiably breaking the ceasefire almost every single day, and now they just continue to do what they're going to do. And it's just being less discussed than ever. He says, very dangerous. The plan is likely to be pretext for the resumption of the genocide. Well, I argue that never stopped. The reality is the plan of a divided Gaza is being laid out as Israel controlling, which is exactly what we all knew would happen because that's what Donald Trump promised. Or Biden, by the way. But as Giannis points out, Guardian wrote the article, U.S. military planning for dividing with the green zone. And so the genocide continues in hushed silence, with the rest of the world lulled into a false sense that it has ended. That's the way to frame that. It never stopped. They never once even paused, as far as I could tell. They were bombing, kidnapping, starving the entire time. That's not hyperbole, guys. We've been proving it every single day. Now, also, Israel Exposed put out a very important thing. I wanted to make sure you just got this. I'll point to it again in a future show. It says, this is what he wrote, updated. We've submitted a total of 4 terabytes, which is gigantic, of Gaza footage sourced from over 350 Palestinian journalists, medical staff, and multiple research teams. It includes 855,318 images, 255,000, 32 videos, 32,101 files to browse through. There's the link, watermeloncrimes.com/archives. And it's just a massive file of basically everything that people have been observing, documenting, people like Yunus Tarawi, all the people out there doing day after day after day of taking work from what Israel IDF members are posting on their own TikToks or what they're getting caught saying publicly, and that everyone denies is even there, on top of all the horrific things you probably never want to see twice. It's there. And then ask yourself how it's possible this could be continuing this long with all the evidence. Now, I only included this because I saw it right before I was going live. I actually put aside a whole thing about the same thing I've been kind of highlighting here and there and in between points about how they're just trying to be partisans, just trying to act like everything's fine. I'm including it because we're going to go to a point about an actual lie that's just very, very clear about tariffs that you all know. I mean, everybody honest already knew this, but just because I saw it beforehand, Nick Adams comes out, and this is what you're getting, and says, you are either with President Trump or you're against America. Well, Jack Posobiec did the exact same thing today. I tweeted about it. The point is, these people are going right back to you're with us or you're against us, right? Like, right, George Bush, right, neocons, right, mission accomplished. Like, this is the same people, the same sentiment, rather, the same kind of division tactic. You're either with Trump or you're against it. What happens if you agree with what Trump is doing, or what happens if you disagree with his plan for a certain point, but you overall support America? Does that suddenly mean that you can't, I don't even need to make this a logical point. That's just stupid, guys. Nick Adams is trying to shock you into either blind support for Trump or you're not American. How about people that disagree with Trump but still believe in America? How about people that recognize what Trump is doing is anti-American? Or any number of differing opinions that just, people can hold a wrong opinion and have the best of intentions. Not that we should assume that. The point is just these people are trying to drive you outside, to act against your own interest because that you feel somehow that you're not on the right team, because that's what they think drives everything. And MAGA's X simply goes, excuse me, and just posts everything. America last, 50-year mortgages, Israel first, spending more than Biden, no peace in Ukraine, war, on and on and on, Argentina, beef, dump, Elon. These people don't care. So in that point, this is just one small example that you guys already knew, that everybody was already saying that was being honest about this, and the typical screaming partisans were lying about it up until this point and are still lying about it. As Rand Paul writes from the New York Post article, Trump slashes coffee, banana tariffs to cut soaring grocery bills. Oh, you mean the grocery bills that he never even faltered on saying were absolutely not going up, that were down for everybody because Democrats are lying, except then he cuts the tariffs because grocery bills are too high? And then continues to lie about how the grocery bills are not too high. I mean, this is the most gaslighting administration I've ever seen in my life. And Rand Paul rightly says, this means that tariffs were taxes all along, because they always have been. You're putting tariffs on the process which increase prices for Americans. Even if you genuinely think, and they definitely could end up benefiting the larger economy for Americans. But that rarely trickles down to the individual person because of the way our system works, but we don't ever get into that. But just simple point, and how frustrating it is that we have to battle against this kind of dishonesty. And just to make another point on top of that, the Daily Beast, the Republican platform, the president cut Switzerland's tariffs because it was best for American interests, because the Swiss made a better deal to exchange American goods? No, because Rolex CEO gave him a priceless gold watch. Are we going to pretend like we all don't know this is what's going on? Even if you want to argue that because it benefits Trump, that therefore somehow that's an American interest, it's still a simple tit for tat game. It's like we've seen with any number of things in colleges. And if you promise, or rather, if you come on my side with the agenda, then we won't pressure you. If you call us out, we're going to find a reason to remove funding for some other different reason. This is ridiculous. This is like, and he's been getting planes and necklaces. And in what world would the same people not be freaking out if it was Obama or anybody else, because that's a crime. That's enrichment. He's profiteer. Yes, just like he is. But the bottom line is the tariffs had nothing to do with anything other than coercing something. And in this case, they stroked his ego and gave him something. And he goes, okay, I'll take this away. Probably to the expense of American interests, or however you look at it. The point is, it has nothing to do with helping you. It's about muscling situation. It's bigger than just financial, to be quite honest. But here is what Nick Sorter had to say about it. President Trump just signed an executive order eliminating tariffs on beef, coffee, and tropical fruits, which, by the way, is not even accurate. Big surprise, though, right? And says this is an effort to bring down prices in America. Keep focusing on affordability. Okay, so let's walk through this really quickly. So you have things that are a certain price. Trump comes up and increases tariffs. Maybe you still think that would have ended up or is going to end up in the back. Maybe it already is, but the prices go up, as inevitably they will. And let's just say they go up 50%. Okay, Trump comes back in a month later and slashes that by 25% and says, we're saving you money, #winning. And you go, okay, wait a minute. If it went up 50%, now it goes down 25%. Doesn't that mean that it's still up 25%? Yeah, it kind of does, though. And that's just a general point. That is an example, but each thing is going to be different. But the reality is these things are not down below where they were before. And maybe they'll get there with this action. But for him to just scream out, we're winning because of this, it's just, as always, blind support for the team narrative. And in this case, even being inaccurate, but also just driving you against your own interest. It's frustrating, isn't it? But I believe everyone's starting to see this, if not already has for a long time. And that's why Rand Paul is calling it out. And that's why these fake patriots hate him. Now, on the ethics overlap, which I think is a monumentally important story, this speaks to, well, let's put it this way. I believe this is about some largely, let's just say, foreign influence. I think it's Israel by and large, but it could be more than that. Even just knowing that Zionism is beyond one country at the end of the day, very well could just be, it could be multiple things. My point is just acknowledge the lack of ethics pledges and the lack of the security clearances, what that can create. So keep that in mind. Whether you agree with me on what is behind that or what might be exploiting it, recognize that doing this way has created an opening that very well could mean China came in and we don't know that. It's the same point, right? Because at the end of the day, what this did was create that opening for something to happen. And I think it's because it was already happening. And what this was, as we well know now, the most Zionist administration in history, all the promises about Israel and the promises about Zionism and removing people from the country that don't believe in Israel. And when it came time to find out whether some of those appointees might actually have some kind of a background issue, might actually have some kind of secret funding from a foreign government, well, they skipped over the ethics pledges that would have found that out. It's very easy to see. We covered this probably 4 different shows. This one, I think, is the one we covered it the most. But keeping this in mind, this is from 2025 in January, right when it started. And it was, by the way, that was before, this is January 15th, that article, right? So this was being discussed. It never came to pass. And what was my point at the time? Well, they'll probably happen, but it's still worth calling it out before they get there. And then they never even came to pass. Not every single person, but the important ones, the ones that were, the Bondi, Gnome kind of inner circle overlap. And now you're going to find out one in particular that I think stands out. This is from back in March before we get to the article from ProPublica. Highly unusual. White House halts FBI background checks for senior staff, shifts them to Pentagon. See, these were incremental steps that at the moment didn't seem too crazy because, well, the Pentagon's going to take over, right? Well, guess what didn't really happen? And so it's the same point as we start with the ethics pledges, which didn't really come to pass. And then we have the FBI inclusion and they have background checks that they said, well, we'll let the Pentagon do it, which didn't really fully happen. Then later it became polygraphs and it became other security clearances, which they basically just shucked. So this is back in March. Okay, so just showing you this is not some new discovery and feels, the thing I keep pointing out is why wouldn't the Democrats be losing their minds about this? The only thing I can think of is that there's whatever this is covering up, they're a part of too. Kind of the way we're talking about the Epstein files, right? Or the idea of the vote overlap with the Epstein files we're going to get into today and how that's being clearly driven to allow none of it to really be exposed other than little, parts here and there that don't really come with the full body, which is how that's supposed to work. The White House has quietly directed the FBI to halt the background checks, remember March, for background check process for dozens of Donald Trump's top staffers and has transferred the process to the Pentagon, according to sources familiar. White House officials took the unusual step of ordering a stop to the background check investigations after they deemed the process too intrusive. Okay, so explain to me, if the process was, that was their word, too intrusive, would the Pentagon be less intrusive? No, I mean, objectively, could be. No, especially if we get to the point where I think the Pentagon is exactly part of the problem. But logically speaking, it wouldn't be. They're typically more invasive, to use the same word, intrusive. So it's invasive, intrusive, but we'll let the Pentagon do it. And they kick it to them. But then also, why would the White House be ordering them to stop that in the midst of the process where it's needed before you put people in place? It says the procedure typically involves extensive interviews as well as a review of financial records, foreign contacts, past employment, and potential security risks. Apparently, the most transparent administration in history just didn't feel like that was necessary for national security, right? Who cares about potential national security risks while we're worried about national security? Also recognize that before, with the first administration, what happened with Acosta and Epstein, which I think there's much related to all of this. Well, in this very process, that's where he admitted that he was told that Epstein was connected to intelligence and to let it go. Remember? And the Trump administration got that information and said, okay, come on board, bud. That's exactly the kind of obfuscation we like in our team. That's exactly what happened. Other than that statement, I can't know what they said, but that was ultimately what happened. They brought him in anyway. And so now I think this is what they were trying to avoid. This is just my opinion. Trump comes to this point and he goes, well, that screwed us last time. So let's just skip past any kind of divulging of information because we're not working for American interests. That's what I would think in my mind. The White House instead decided to transfer the background check process to the White House for White House personnel to the Department of Defense for them to complete the checks. Now, here's the interesting overlap. Because this kind of drifts into the background, and you'll see very clearly when people ask, they're like, we defer to the White House, so nobody really gets to know. But at the end of the day, when the Department of Defense was taken over by Trump's team, who's to say that they didn't then conduct those the way they saw fit? Because that was one of the earlier ones to be appointed, right? And it says a former FBI official told ABC News the approach was highly unusual. That's an understatement. Pentagon representatives referred questions to the matter to the White House, right? So when they're asking, hey, did you guys do that? What's happening? What's the process? We refer to the White House. The White House, who's the one that ordered it to happen and is the one essentially, like the idea that the White House, the executive branch, is dictating this kind of process. I mean, it is a violation of at least the norms, but recognize that that's them with the onus. You made the choice to not do this, to not look further, even the things that we can definitely prove, like the ethics pledges, like these other polygraphs. It says among Trump's first presidential actions was issuing a memorandum granting the highest level of security clearance to top White House officials who had not been fully vetted through the background checks. Just to make it clear, we don't get the full picture because they won't answer the question. But the truth is you can prove that there were many people that did not go through the proper vetting process. That's why I was screaming about that in the beginning of this whole administration. And yet they were given the highest level of security. Now, you could argue that they did their own. You could argue that it's all on the up and up and we just don't see it. That's certainly possible. That they just didn't show you what they did is what I mean. But shouldn't we be concerned about this? Seeing as how we do know that there are people that are avidly, openly advocating for Israel's interest, in most cases over U.S. interests, despite what they say. Many of them in that inner circle, like a Bessent, like a Hegseth, like a Waltz, or any number of those people who are very, very outspoken, like diehard ardent Zionists, which, by the way, does not just mean you believe in a home for the Jews. That's the game they play. It is a very serious and outlined political organization that has very clear mindset. It's not just, arguing you believe it's a homeland for the Jews and that's what Zionism means is so inherently dishonest. Every Zionist knows that's not true. The only people that buy that narrative are people that don't understand what Zionism truly is, whether Jewish or not. Anyway, the point is that list of officials, while not publicly disclosed, included dozens of high-level White House staffers. Dozens, according to sources familiar with the matter. It says, however, Trump's transition team has refused for months to enter into an agreement with the Department of Justice under Biden to begin the background checks. Remember, we talked about it at the time. They dragged their feet. They really didn't get any of this done for individuals who would staff Trump's incoming administration, which has contributed in part to the staffing issues they now face. Well, really jump past that real quickly when we all just ignored that none of this was even happening under the mainstream media hype idea that we don't have people in place. Isn't that funny how instead of focusing on the absolute criminal actions of not doing this, they focused on the fact that he's incompetent, didn't have people in place, which is usually the way that goes. You know, the whole system, keeping you focused on the window dressing instead of the real problem. So, hold on, make sure I didn't miss that. Okay, yeah, make sure that was that one. So, talking about this, I think I'm going to skip this for 1 second. I forget where that was going to come into play. I could play it now. You've seen that clip, but for the podcast, we'll get to it in a second. It's relevant to this article, I believe. Now, so that was March. Okay, the reality of them dragging their feet, my show on the ethics pledge is lacking, comes to the port from the discussion from today. Now, yet again, despite this being a senator, whether left or right, somebody we shouldn't blindly trust, or anybody for that matter, the point is that the article you can read, the source material's there, and the reality of this is pretty obvious. And I think, as always, it's in the interest of somebody from a left-right paradigm position to use it to make the other side look bad, but always with the intention, in my mind, to never actually really hold anybody accountable. Maybe getting fired at the most, right? So that's why when they do this, you can argue, you know, as long as nobody goes to jail, that there was really no consequence. So him pointing this out does not mean it's false, as always. But here's this clip first of him asking back in September 16th about specifically these polygraphs.
The basis for requiring polygraph exams of your workforce and asking them if they've made negative comments about you?
I don't know what reports you're referring to, ranking member, and I reject any reporting that has false information in it, so I'm not going to respond to that. As far as polygraphs go, generally they're always...
Do you notice what he just did right there?
Reports you're referring to, ranking member.
I don't know what reports you're referring to. Okay, so first statement, then that means you don't know what they are, so how can you know that they're false? Right? If you don't know the reports, then you can't speak to whether they're true or not, right?
And I reject any reporting that has false information in it, so I'm not...
Well, yeah, so does anybody. You know, but the point is, he's not saying it's false. He's saying in a broad sense, I reject things that aren't true. Well, yeah, you know, this is not... Now, honestly, that's probably one of the better responses he's ever had, but it's also very clear. The point is, what he's highlighting is not false. Why I'm pointing this out is because Kash Patel lied about it, but like a lot of other stuff, about Epstein, about a ton of things.
Going to respond to that. As far as polygraphs go, generally they're always and always have been utilized at the FBI to
generally always
track down those that leak sensitive information and have unauthorized disclosures to the media, and we will continue to use them to ensure the integrity of the FBI.
Now, I want to point out, polygraphs have historically been shown to be pretty inconsistent. So it's not really even about the idea that the polygraph would have divulged something, but it's the entire process, being a polygraph being one of the things that are being seen, right? Other parts of it were muddied and hid in the corner. The polygraph part of it is being, somebody's talking about it. People are whistleblowing about it. So it's one part that we're being able to see. So it's not that would have been the big, finder. I honestly think polygraphs are abused by the police, but overall it's about the hiding of the background, which that would have gotten to.
Did any individual on your senior executive team, the director's advisory team, or who serve in the positions on the 7th floor receive disqualifying alerts on their polygraphs?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the personnel discussions that were had on a polygraph. Those are private discussions, and many of them relate to ongoing investigations.
Did you or Attorney General Bondi provide any individual with a waiver so they could remain employed after they received disqualifying alerts on their polygraphs?
I'll have to get back to you.
All right. Okay. I just realized what I did, by the way. So that's good timing. So we're going to pause with that. I'm going to play this clip for you. Back to this. So that was back in September where he's lying about that. So I'm surprised that I was focusing my mind on the ethics pledges and the lack there. The point was they shifted to the Pentagon, right? Okay. So highly unusual. White House halts FBI background checks for senior staff, which is weird in the first place. Don't really end up solving it, but they shift them to the Pentagon. The Pentagon says, ask the White House, we don't want to comment. Well, here's why that stands out to me as a big problem, especially since what I'm trying to get to here is that what I sense is Israel infiltration into our government that's being hidden from view. Here's what Wilkerson said about the Pentagon, that they defer to for these checks of people that might have Israeli connections.
It's unquestionable that the Epstein business was heavily influenced, let me put it that way, by Mossad.
And so that's somehow emblematic on these huge geopolitical issues.
Yes, I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon in 2002. The Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the third most powerful man in the Defense Department. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, "Hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does."
It's just crazy how that can be so documented and so discussed, right? Okay. So the Mossad-run Pentagon is doing the supposed background checks that they won't comment on. That, back in March, by the way. Now here in, again, the September point of him denying all of this. Now, Dick Durbin, who posted this from back in September, who asked the question, goes, "Oh yeah," and post the ProPublica article in, contradicting what Cash was saying. And Amy the Great simply adds, "Oh, you mean the guy who released the doctored evidence couldn't pass a polygraph?" And this is Wired. FBI Jeffrey Epstein prison video had nearly 3 minutes cut out. Are we all forgetting that? That they swore up and down was completely up and up on accurate. And it was other cuts, by the way, that came out later. This all came out. Here's the other one. Metadata shows FBI's raw Jeffrey Epstein video was likely modified. And they absolutely lied through their teeth about that, like they do about everything. And this is why anybody who's not a complete infant can recognize that they lied to you about that and not go, just lie, make it something you want, pretend it's something other than it is, which is what we see with everything from immigration to ICE enforcement. I mean, it's just very, very self-evident. So here's the article from the ProPublica. FBI Director Kash Patel waived polygraph security screening for Dan Bongino and 2 others. Now, I find it much more interesting just because of who Stephen Miller is, who his aide is in this conversation, who was one of those other 2. But Dan Bongino being number 2 in the FBI is obviously very relevant. So, November 14th, came out yesterday. FBI Director Kash Patel granted waivers to Deputy Director Dan Bongino and 2 other newly hired senior FBI staff members, exempting them from passing polygraph exams normally required to gain access to America's most sensitive classified information, according to a former senior FBI official and several other government officials. Bongino's role as the FBI's second highest ranking official means he is responsible for day-to-day operations of the agency. So just, the influence from this person or any of them is just to take away from this is what they could affect with if they were working on behalf of a foreign government would be hard to map out. It would be, and it's not just the FBI, I understand that. The point is about all the different inner circle. But this one, through this one article, is about the FBI. But think about all that we've seen, how much can be influenced if these kind of people were acting in the interest of somebody else. Anything, guys, anything, especially with how often they're being caught lying. He says, so he's responsible for day-to-day operations, including green lighting surveillance missions, coordinating with intelligence agency partners like Israel, and managing the Bureau's 56 field offices across the country. So think about that kind of influence if this person's not acting for American interests. The deputy director receives some of the country's most closely held secrets, including the president's daily brief, which also contains intelligence from the CIA and National Security Agency. I'll include this one. We did this show, and this was in regard to Walls and the app they were using, the telemessage app that was archiving all of their signal chats in the inner circle of the White House and telegraphing that back to Israel. It's very, very provable. And the media, and as always, the Democrats, focused on the signal gate as opposed to the real gate, which was the Israel app gate, siphoning off that information. State Department revealed to be using Israeli intelligence linked chat app involved in Trump admin hack. My point is that these are the people that are in the inner circle. And these are the people that were put there by the insider elitist oligarchs that are seemingly blind Zionists. So that being the point, whether it's Dan Bongino or any of the rest of them. The deputy director receives some of the country's most closely held secrets. It says people familiar with the matter say his ascent to the position without passing a standard FBI background check was unprecedented. When ProPublica sought comment from the FBI, the agency denied Bongino or the other senior staff members failed polygraph tests. like Cash did in front of Congress. It says, it is false that the individuals you reference failed polygraphs. It says he added the FBI, and this is Ben Williamson. The FBI follows all laws and procedures on personnel security measures. Hardly. And any implication otherwise is false. Furthermore, while the FBI does not comment on confidential security information, particularly in matters of personnel, this article is riddled with falsehoods. It misrepresents polygraph protocol, inaccurately portrays FBI security measures, and makes multiple false claims about FBI employees who have done nothing wrong. Okay, then they reached out to say, hey, we'll specify what you consider to be false. They didn't want to comment. Which kind of, I mean, you could decide for yourself. I think that tends to speak volumes. You're being given an opportunity, or even when you're talking about it on your social media. This is wrong. This is false. They don't seem to want to do that. Now, there's many sources who are claiming this from within the FBI. So what you have is you get the typical response, which we shouldn't ignore. It's possible they're all lying and this guy's telling the truth. But the interesting point is how many times we've seen Bondi and Nome and Trump and Cash and Dan lie through their teeth. Or McLaughlin, for example, I just did a show on that 7 different times with the most extreme dishonesty, blatantly or Stephen Miller claiming to have won Supreme Court rulings that were exactly the opposite. I mean, these guys know what they're doing, whether it's flooding the zone with nonsense to distract or just that they are trying to destroy this country. I don't know. But what he's saying there could be, right? But overall, you have when you have people who have been consistently being shown to be lying and caught lying and then still double down the lie, you have to consider that when they're talking about something that's contentious. But don't assume. ProPublica asked and they didn't respond. A polygraph exam is not technically pass or fail, but a person is not cleared for approval, according to the FBI, if the examiner finds deception or is unable to reach a conclusion about the veracity of the answers given. Officials said that a person may not have technically failed the exams. The results could be deemed inconclusive, which would not meet the FBI standards for hiring. So even an inconclusive would not be good enough, according to them. The FBI spokesperson initially said that the 3 officials are so-called Schedule C, a category reserved for political appointees, which is exactly what the Stephen Miller overlap is. He said the status would mean they were not required to undergo polygraphs. Stephen Miller, by the way, being one of the most important in my mind of the ones that did not go through the ethics background, any kind of background check. It says 2 other officials, Marshall Yates, the agency's liaison with Congress, and one called Nicole Rucker, Patel's personal assistant, did not clear their polygraph exam and were granted waivers by Patel that allowed them to get high-level security clearance and officials with knowledge of the issue. Neither of the roles is as high profile as Bongino's, nor does either one have prior FBI experience. This year, an employee with the FBI Security Division filed a formal complaint alleging the waivers violated agency policy. Well, obviously, you're giving people waivers for what's supposed to be the make or break point for whether they're, have security background issues, conflicts of interest. It says the Security Division conducts employee polygraph exams and evaluates their results. So the point is, an employee that does this, that literally is the one conducting this process, is the one speaking out. And it's saying that he evaluates the results that come from these processes. And it says its mission is to protect the FBI from leaks of classified information and infiltration by foreign spies. The employee filed the complaint with the division director, Robert Turner, a 22-year-old veteran of the Bureau who previously held roles in counterterrorism and counter-espionage. A complaint about the waivers was also shared with the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General, sources said. According to her resume, Rucker, 40, has served as an assistant to Stephen Miller. Okay, so this is what really stood out to me. So Rucker is currently the assistant of FBI head Cash Patel. Rucker is one of the people who was allowed to pass, given a waiver to security clearances. Stephen Miller, as an aide, was somebody not required to have ethics pledges. This is insane to me. With somebody, now you may disagree with Stephen Miller. This is rooted in a completely personal opinion of what I think you can prove about Stephen Miller. But I can't speak to intention or whether he genuinely believes what he's doing is pro-America first. But I'm of the mind that Stephen Miller is a very proud, open Zionist, actively talking about what he thinks this country needs to do for Israel. Maybe you think that's with good intentions. Stephen Miller, in my mind, is somebody who is doing everything he can to destroy this country's values, destroy this country in general, like a lot of them. That's my opinion. Either way, you can see that he is actively working for Israel interests in a lot of different ways. So his assistant, who is now Kash Patel's assistant, who didn't have to any security checks, might show the connection between how this infiltration is working, or Kash Patel's girlfriend, for that matter. It says that Stephen Miller, who is the powerful architect of the administration's immigration crackdown, which helps no one more than Israel, in my opinion, Rucker would have detailed insight into day-to-day FBI operations and those meeting within the director's office. I'm sure we could piece together why that would be wildly powerful and important for something like the Israeli intelligence apparatus. She also assists in planning Patel's travel. A former FBI official familiar with her job responsibilities said. The White House said Rucker is not sharing information on the FBI's operations with Miller. So we're told. It's a weird thing that they shouldn't feel the need to state, or even that somebody would ask, even though it's an obviously logical point. It says, and referred further questionings to the FBI, the Bureau of Department of Justice. So his former assistant is totally, absolutely not relaying information back to Stephen Miller, even though if he did, I doubt that would even be a problem for Trump's administration. It just shows you how this all connects. And I'm of the mind that they very much are relaying this information. While an FBI spokesperson discussed the polygraph issues with ProPublica, Patel, Bongino, Yates, Rucker, and Turner did not respond for comments. It says staff who work in the director's office on the 7th floor, Kash Patel, on the 7th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington must also obtain an additional clearance called SCI, or Sensitive Compartmented Information. SCI contains some of America's most sensitive intelligence secrets, and employees with that clearance are read in to various compartments or programs. Bongino, Yates, and Rucker all obtained SCI clearances. After being granted the waivers, people familiar with the clearance levels said. So not only did they get a waiver from the background check and polygraph ethics pledges, now they're being given SCI clearance as not vetted appointees. Why? Yes, that's unprecedented. Why is it happening? Well, I think we're very clearly seeing what is, this infiltration. Former acting FBI director Brian Driscoll sued Kash Patel, Bondi, and the Bureau in September, saying he was subjected to political loyalty tests and illegally fired. Now, that tends to be taken as, are you loyal to Trump? The FBI declined to comment when the suit was filed, and federal agencies have yet to respond in court. So I argue it's probably a loyalty test about Trump, because they were asked, do you like Kash Patel? Have you talked about him before? Do you like Donald Trump? But it could be something else too, because since we don't have the information, we can't know for sure. A loyalty test could be done in a lot of ways. And right now, people are being removed because they're not blindly adherent to what appears to be an Israel first agenda that even conservatives are calling out. It says little is known about Nicole Rucker. It's interesting to me that ProPublica made, of all of it, a very clear point about this one person more than the rest of it. Not only, but more than the rest of it. I think that says something to what ProPublica is trying to highlight. It says little is known about Nicole Rucker, who spells her name online as Nicole with a K. Multiple sources have described Rucker as Patel's personal assistant. She joined Patel on a recent foreign trip to London, where she sat in on a sensitive meeting with Western intelligence ally, according to a knowledgeable source. Rucker arrived at the FBI on January 20th, began working in the director's suite without a security clearance, according to a former FBI employee familiar with her work. How is that even think about that overlap, guys? Direct connections and yet no clearance. Due to her initial lack of clearance, Rucker was escorted from the FBI lobby to a secure director's suite by Turner, who was then the director of the FBI, deputy of the FBI security division. Rucker eventually obtained a security clearance and was no longer escorted. So you could look at it a few different ways. You could consider this as maybe that there were people in the FBI that were genuinely of the interest in America first and recognized people were, and like think about Doge and all of the very weird, alarming connections to Israel within that too, but also just people of his own team, like the 20-year-old 20-somethings that have no background, and just dumping these people in the most secure locations and having people within the government go, whoa. Whether they were a Democrat or Republican, just go like, this is insane. Like this is a whole new level. And saying, I just cannot be okay with that, until they pushed him out of the way and got him fired. And so you could argue that's because these people are acting not in the interest of America. And people that were in there feel that this is a dramatic change from the norm. You could consider it for yourself. That's just one way to look at it. Overall, I think this is alarming. Like I said, whether or not you agree with my view, How is this not insane? How is this not over the top? People that are riddled through this government, a government, by the way, that is doing more changing to our life right now than I've ever seen. I don't mean like you could call COVID maybe more as what happened, but then alleviated to some degree. But what they're doing right now through Trump's administration is continuing that. Exactly. And doing much more that's going to change irrevocably how our lives are lived. I hope people can see through this. Now, on top of that, speaking of Dan Bongino, let's not forget what he said here. His almost rushed answer about what he cares about more than anything. And think about what that means for the people he's bringing in and his lack of clearance and lack of polygraph in regard to the FBI.
What cause is dear to your heart?
Cause is dear to my Israel, the defense of Israel.
What a weird response. I always say that. Yes, it's a short clip. You could find the full thing. I've seen it. It's just you're in a podcast and you're being asked about what before you're about to be put into an American government position, and your response is defense of Israel without even finishing the sentence. It's very weird to me. Now, you could argue that that's just because he knows how the game is played. And, he's clumsy about it, but he knows that from being on the outside, but he wants to be desperately on the inside, seeing that they have to bow to Israeli interests. And so that's what his response becomes. It doesn't always have to be the absolute, like with Trump and Epstein. It could just be that he knows that him being on the list is going to hurt him, so he covers it all up. Or maybe his friends are on there, maybe not him. But it's still completely dishonest and disgusting and criminal for him to do what he's doing. That doesn't have to be that he's a child predator. That's what people like. We'll get to a clip from Glenn Beck. Or why are they covering up that Trump is screwing children? It's like that very well could be where that goes. Or it could be that Trump is covering up Epstein files because of people that he knows that are moneyed interest, like people like Peter Thiel, for example. They take it to the extreme because they're trying to shock you back from what might be there. That's what these people have done their entire careers. And I'll just because the show is, I think, a very well put together one, but the title just sell. Now, in regard to the FBI investigations, I want to touch on a few of these and the other one just briefly. And an article, by the way, from The Intercept back in October. Just another day in the TLAV life, huh? Give me 1 second to get all set back up. Let's just set up the entire show again. This is how we live in this world. For those on the podcast, we got booted out of the platform like it happens almost every other show. Give me 1 second to get set back up. I would not even address it anymore if I didn't have to go through all this to get set back up again. So my apologies for having this happen every other show we do. So let me get this pulled up really quickly. We were just talking about Antifa. Let me just play something really quickly as I get this reorganized. Appreciate your patience, guys.
We have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocity...
All right. Well, thank you for your patience, guys. Let me know if there's any issue. I mean, it looks like the chat's still disconnected, so we'll keep going. I hope you guys are back. So, getting into the FBI investigations. And the point was, following up on the investigations around Antifa and Dallas and the shootings therein. So, do me a favor for those watching. Shoot me a text if we go down again, seeing as how I lost the chat. Now I can't see whether or not we're down while I'm doing the show. Yeah. It's funny to think about all the people out there that love to project how much they're censored, and then think about how that compares to what we go through on this platform every single day, but also just the many different platforms, literally all of them that we've been censored from. But in regard to the shootings and the follow-up, so I'm trying to get my mind back. And so we're talking about the FBI. We're talking about the lack of security clearances, the lack of polygraph testing, the lack of background checks in regard to the Israel connection to all of it. The Kash Patel assistant being Stephen Miller's ex-assistant, who also didn't get a background check or any of the rest of the clearances, which I think speaks for itself. And so we have to consider what that might be doing through Kash Patel, but also just recognize that I'm of the mind that this person is somebody who might very well just be the person being presented as such. Like, it just seems very crazy to me that this person doesn't even seem, it's almost the way that the FBI is acting around him, or even like things like this. On the 14th, he yet again post an article from Fox News as his report about something, as opposed to some kind of official document. It's a PR marketing game, and they all seem to be so shockingly out of their depth. In this case, the Dallas shooting, like I was talking before, it seems to be about one person who shot at an FBI agent, and that person is then being used to blame everybody else who was there for being terrorists. Now, again, even if you think that these people were part of a group where this happened, the crime of saying that somebody being present at a protest is a terrorist act because for us, providing assistance to terrorism simply because they were there protesting ICE and an action took place. Now, this is going to go to court, and I'm willing to bet you that this goes nowhere. Like I'm seeing with a lot of these, like the October 31st terror plot. They claimed they stopped. We didn't know where it was, when it was happening, how it got put together. But we knew it was coming. They said pumpkin, so we knew. A same kind of thing. I get the sense that this is being manufactured. But isn't it weird how little information we're getting about any of this stuff? Now, we're going to get to a point about Thomas Crooks in a really, really well done video that Tucker Carlson put out. But there's other points in there I want to get to in a second about how it's weird that there's still the effort to make it about how they lied about his political standing, which I think is very misrepresented. But 99.9% of this video, I think, is outstanding. And it really does call something out. But they're still not doing anything there. They're covering up a ton of things. January 6th pipe bomber point. So here's what Kash Patel puts out on the 14th. Under President Trump's leadership with the Justice Department, Bondi and the FBI and our partners are going after violent Antifa networks. Okay, well, this happened when you arrested these people a long time ago. This is an article simply just pointing to new points on it. So he took the opportunity to post it again and say, look, every day we're fighting down these people. Well, I'm not really seeing that. In fact, what I'll get to in a second is the evidence that they haven't arrested a single person, as all the conservatives are calling out. Not one of the people they claim they were going to arrest. Not one. Now, we understand people like Comey have not really been arrested. They've been indicted, which are just accusations. And I think it's pretty clear the day by day it goes forward that it's not going to go anywhere. And I think they knew that. I think they were trying to hope that you would put it to bed in hope, just, we did it, it's over. Comey got charged. And then people just ignore it. But he says 15 plus individuals in Texas are charged with multiple offenses, including material support for terrorists. Well, that doesn't even seem to be accurate. But what it is, it comes down to a bunch of people who were present and one person who shot. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. First, let's look at the FBI or the Fox article. Antifa members indicted in Texas ICE facility riot, attempted murder of officer. It says, quote, anyone who targets law enforcement or uses violence to advance an anarchist agenda, which is, I always have to point out how stupid that is to claim that somebody is an anarchist, but yet at the same time is trying to initiate a government agenda. Like we're Democrats fighting to change the government. Well, then it wouldn't be anarchists then, you utter morons. But they want it to mean something other than it is. They want you to think terrorism. It really is just the only ideology that has no place for people like them. It's rules, but no rulers. That's how this works. But it says these are domestic terrorists, and under President Trump's leadership, we're finding them and bringing them to justice, said Kash Patel. Anyone who targets law enforcement. other than people raping children or other, well, I guess that's not law enforcement, but other than any number of examples where we could highlight where they're not actually doing any of that. Or how about all the law enforcement that were forced to take shots that killed them, or forced to, you could point out a whole bunch of overlaps. The point is that this is not even really what's happening. The 9 indicted members are charged with rioting with the intent to commit an act of violence. So you see how this gets alarmingly into the pre-crime overlap? Even riot is a far stretch in a protected act, by the way, of protesting. But the idea that they were intending to commit a crime, you know how difficult that is to prove, out short of them like writing down that they were intending to do so, that does not seem to be the case here. So they're trying to extend this out to make it about, he wants it to seem, in my opinion, as some kind of, just like with the other example, the over Halloween one, is some sprawling network that they're breaking down, just like he made that ridiculous claim of Trump ending the fentanyl network in the world because he made a statement out loud. To me, this shows extreme desperation and just a lack of understanding of how easy it is to see these things, to see through statements. Like this is, I think, the limitations of how they think, and are unaware that people will take the time to look through what they're saying. But it says the 9 indicted, intent to commit violence, providing material support for terrorists. Again, a stretch. In the idea that by being present or by communicating in the room where other people were discussing protesting, that means that because this guy shot, therefore they're all providing terror support. This is the same kind of overview they're using in all these cases. Conspiracy and use to and carry an explosive. A lot of these things are completely, well, I'll wait to get to the next article. They're just like the rest of them. There's claims coming out. And like, for example, an explosive, and then it comes back to it being like a firecracker in their pocket or something ridiculous. That's just made that up. My point, though, is that over the ICE discussion, exactly stuff like that, where they make a claim that they had, or even lying, that they had automatic rifles and weapons. It turns out that it wasn't even true. In fact, she just had a gun, but it was at home because they knew she had a license. So they lied about what she was doing. That's in a real story. So when they say these things, that needs to be taken with a pound of salt. And it says attempted murder of officers, one person, discharging a gun during and related to and in furtherance of a crime of violence, corruptly concealing a document or record, conspiracy to conceal documents. Antifa, they riot as a terrorist organization, and today's guilty pleas for violent assaults on law officers mark a turning point. Now, you see how dishonest that is from Pam Bondi? Okay, so these people are brought before a judge, seemingly random people protesting in this country, and are being told, you're being charged with like 75 years of crimes. Terrorism, relating to terrorism, support of a terrorist act, violence, rioting. And if you don't plead, we are going to send you to jail for 50 years, right? And so they then go, okay, I'm guilty for the only real charge they're giving, which is violent assaults against government officials, which, by the way, if you look at the actual video, we're talking about protests, which it's not like these are people running up and like tackling officers to the ground and punching them in the face. This is more about the conflict or that's weird. The contact between these people and these protests. And yes, I'm not going to say that there weren't laws violated here, especially going into the office and so on. But if they pled guilty for assaulting an officer and then you say, see, they're a terrorist organization, we told you, it's like they did with Garcia. When they go and say something about, yes, there was a legal immigration overlap. See, we knew it. He's a rapist, MS-13, Trendy, Ragwa monster. Well, that's not what anybody said, but then they pushed the narrative. So she's coming out and saying, we knew it. He's a terrorist because they pled guilty to with the small charge. Federal prosecutors said 11 of the suspects rioted and attacked the detention center, which was being used to house illegal immigrants awaiting deportation. Once at the facility, this is what Fox is framing it as. Once at the facility, they began allegedly shooting off and throwing fireworks at the building and vandalizing vehicles. Okay, so right there, you could argue these are crimes, right? Vandalism, potentially breaking and entering, absolutely. But explain this for me. So you're telling me that they planned a terrorist attack to execute ICE members, but then while they were there, decided to shoot off fireworks and show their faces, and make a whole big thing about being is that what somebody would do? Who wants to kill officers, leave evidence and go in, it seems insane to me that they would think this makes sense. What all of these cases show to me is them trying desperately to expand the framing towards people they want you to think are bad because of maybe one actual bad act or maybe one that they carried out themselves. That means ending up to the lefty terrorists. That's what they're pushing. So by shooting off fireworks, it was they're executing their plan to distract you while they carried out a terrorist attack. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. An Alvarado police officer responded to the chaos after correctional officers called 911. When the officer issued commands, this is when they claim one of them, Song, allegedly yelled, "Go get the rifles," and then opened fire. Because so go get them, fire. This is what they're claiming, right? And says, who was struck in the neck and as an unarmed correctional officer ducked and ran for cover. Song, who many in the Antifa cell look to as their leader, so they're claiming the opposite is being stated by them, fled but was captured by law enforcement on July 15th. Okay. Now let's go a little bit further into, this is just what Grok had to say. Antifa members indicted. And I simply said, I asked, are some of those accused claiming to have no connection to him? Which I already knew was the case. This is that we talked about in the last show. The lawyer, but as always, the lawyer, they're gonna, it's very much worth your time to consider where somebody commits a crime and then just sort of manufactures a narrative to get away with that crime, right? That's what people do if they're dishonest criminals. So but the point being is their lawyers and these people are in many points claiming that they didn't have anything to do with this person. So you also need to consider that, especially with the FBI lying like a matter of policy, but also just not giving you more information to verify anything they're saying when they keep lying constantly. But it simply says on the 14th, the grand jury indicted 9 individuals, which again, as far as I could tell, most of these are criminal complaints. But the point to cut to, Benjamin Song, that's the one they're claiming was the one who shot, weirdly, is not the one with the most charges. Makes sense, right? So Cameron Arnold and Zachary Evans, the two that they're making this about, the two members that were the ones that these are whatever you want to call it, whether they're part of an official Antifa or just what they see as an anti-fascist movement against Trump or whatever you see it as. These were the two that were there, like they're focusing on, that appear to me to be the patsies, if you will. Benjamin Song, it says, first of all, the first two charged with attempted murder, discharging a firearm, even though not even they claim that they're firing firearms. How does that make sense? Similar charges to Arnold, Zachary Evans, and Cameron Arnold. Okay, Benjamin Song, the one they claim fired. Alleged cell leader, directly charged with attempted murder as the shooter who yelled, "Go get the rifles," and fired at the officer and discharging a firearm. Okay. So he's the one who's supposed to be the leader, but they don't know who he is. And he's the one that shot. Nobody else did, but they're charged with attempted murder. It's all because they're extending this into everybody. Now, all the rest of these, I'm willing to bet you, probably go away. Maybe already have. Like right now, this is the same thing with the October 31st one. They were like 7 people, multiple states, and apparently those have vanished into the background, and they're still focusing on the original 2. Yeah, Benjamin Song is explicitly identified as the shooter. No other defendant is accused of pulling the trigger. So explain to me why you would charge them with attempted murder. Because there's no evidence they planned this out to kill people. They're not even claiming that. It says some of the accused, specifically those not identified as the shooter, are effectively claiming, or their representatives are claiming, no direct connection to the act of the shooting, framing their involvement as limited to nonviolent protest, meaning what they're claiming, and they could be lying, that they were there protesting and somebody shot. And then they go, you're all terrorists now. Now, is that not exactly what we keep seeing from these intelligence ops, where they create a violent act and use a patsy to, yes, guys, historically, this has happened countless times. Not to say we should assume that's what it is, though, right? Facts are what matter. Now, it says, in regard to Zachary Evans, he stated that Evans and others were, quote, loosely affiliated and mostly don't know each other well. Now, what I said in the beginning of all this, when I first covered it, is that ultimately you have people that are coming into a chat room. Now, remember, they claim the FBI were there early in this conversation. Excuse me, that's the October one. We'll get to that in a second. But the point was that the FBI infiltrated these things, right, in regard to these groups, Antifa. For this has been a long-term conversation. So when they're in these chat rooms is what they're referring to right there. When they're being monitored, which all of these things, I mean, let's be clear about how much that's happening today from every one of these platforms. The people are coming into these chat rooms, like in the October 31st one, where they stepped in and they were like, hey, guys, let's blow things up. It doesn't make any sense. If these are Antifa terrorist cells, then why would they be publicly discussing terrorist attacks in places where people are coming and going? So in this case, what they're saying is that this person was in this protest chat discussion. They don't really know him very well, whatever that. And that, I think, especially if they're going to claim this was an organized, planned attack, they obviously have to prove that there was more than just him being in that chat room. By that kind of argument, you could argue that you being in this chat is enough to argue that we're all, like, if somebody in this chat carried out an attack, that we were all part of that planning. And it says, similarly, neither Arnold nor Evans is accused of being the shooter in any charging documents anywhere. Progressive outlets like The Intercept, that's how they frame it, have amplified this, arguing terrorism charges exaggerate from a noise demonstration. Very interesting, right? So let's look at the article. I had missed this from October 17th. It's entitled Antifa Protesters Charged with Terrorism for Constitutionally Protected Activity. Now, prosecutors in Texas, remember this is from October, announced that terrorism charges have been filed against 2 people, which expanded out to what did it say, 7 or 8? 2 people for alleged involvement in a shooting during July 4th protest against ICE, an detention center in Texas, in which the local police officer was injured. The Prairie City case is setting a chilling example for how the government will use so-called counterterrorism efforts to crush anti-fascist dissent. Just dissent. People protesting in any context. We've seen plenty of Republicans. Look, during No Kings, you could easily prove, if you weren't a complete infant, that there were plenty of people protesting that weren't Democrats. And yet they framed them all as radical. You know, Trump showed this video of dumping excrement on every, that's insulting and stupid. So, but they always try to make the case, right? It's only the lefties. It's not the case. So dissent is what we're talking about. Anybody protesting Trump is what we're talking about, or whoever's currently in power or in the future. Neither of the people named in the indictment are accused of shooting the gun. Instead, Zachary Evans and Autumn Hill are accused of providing material support to terrorists and having aided and abetted the alleged attempted murder of government officers. And again, it's so light on the data right now, even after all this time, that all we know is that they were communicating in this chat and plan a protest. And yet that's what they're using. Guys, I'm of the mind that this is about that in particular, on top of the things. Broadening out the lens to be able to go after people that they want to associate together. So people are so terrified, even if it doesn't even nobody goes to jail. It's just chilling people's willingness to stand up and go, you're breaking the law, which is what he's doing all over the government right now, all over the industry and institutions. The terrorism charges are an escalation of government efforts to criminalize protest movements by attempting to attribute collective guilt. This is what they write. I agree. With tactics like using RICO laws, which is what the team sport politics were screaming about. RICO laws, which makes it federal. You can argue it's like a coordinated effort, like a mafia thing. With tactics like using RICO laws built to combat organized crime, the government has made a habit of mass prosecuting activists for individuated crimes alleged to have taken place in the context of legal protest activity, which is the reality. Now realize, like they did with you in the red hats and the trucker convoys, is that if somebody breaks the law, that doesn't then invalidate the entire protest. What they're trying to make it out to be is that they were all rioting. Well, no, what happens is people do things that they claim are worthy of, our violence, and then they take down the whole protest. And then when they rightfully push back because you're violating my rights, they say that they're rioting. It happens like clockwork on the left and the right. And we all seem to know that when they're pointing at the other side. It says, even when there's no direct link between those charged and the alleged crimes. So, though such charges frequently don't stick, the lengthy prosecutions hamper protest movements and chill dissent. Quote, the framing of the case by the federal government should worry all of us, a support committee for arrested protesters said in a statement on its website. The glaring inconsistencies in the official narrative and the alarmist accusations are a clear attempt to bolster the Trump administration's claims that the United States is on the verge of chaos and to excuse a dramatic increase in militarized police action. Well, what's interesting is they use that to basically roll out martial law, but then because of that, you are getting chaos. And we are on the verge of chaos because of it didn't start. They're not responding to the lefty crazy madness in the streets. They're creating American pushback and then using that however they see fit. Pardon me. Now it says, investigation by proclamation. On the night of July 4th, protesters from Dallas-Fort Worth held a noise demonstration and set off fireworks outside the ICE facility. It's funny how different it is when it's coming from Fox or the government. Federal officers called local police to the scene. There was an exchange of gunfire between an Alvarado police officer and one other person, in which the officer was injured. That was the neck. The cop was taken to a hospital and released within a few hours. Look, it shouldn't be in any way downplayed that a gun was fired at a police officer. I think that a gun fired at anybody should be important. It should matter. But it's worth pointing out how much it was overhyped in regard to what actually happened versus what they claimed was going on. Always matters. In a lengthy preliminary federal hearing in September, an FBI official told the court that he could not say for certain whether or not the police officer shot first. Yeah, I feel like that's pretty relevant, isn't it? In a preliminary hearing, the FBI said they didn't know. That's Trump's FBI who shot first. How much you want to bet that FBI agent got kicked aside? How dare you not blindly say what we're supposed to say, regardless of whether it's true? That's what everyone knows that now for sure. So if they don't know who shot first, then clearly this could have been something that they orchestrated, like the FBI is known to do. 9 people were arrested that night in the area, and numerous others were arrested in the days that followed, including during aggressive multi-agency raids on homes and community spaces. Okay, so think about this. One guy shoots in this conversation. They claim it's an organized thing. But now, because they claim that, anyone they can connect back to anyone in the group suddenly is an extension of this network, which is what they did. And they started arresting people, raiding homes. How does that have anything to do with what happened at this one event? It doesn't, as far as I can tell. And I'm sure like I said before, this is either going to go to court and we're going to get to dive through all of it, and I'll be able to show you, like with Garcia, that they're flatly lying to you, like we already know they're doing, or it's going to go away, which will make the case either way. But I think that's likely how this works, so they can pretend that they tried and the Democrats wouldn't let them, or whatever the narrative becomes. Always rather be incompetent than criminal, wouldn't they? Now it says 17 people, 17 in all, now face a mixture of state and federal charges relating to the event, including state terrorism. Now here's the crazy part. Somebody who's terrified to go to prison for 70 years because of extremely ridiculous charges from a government that clearly doesn't care about the law, left or right. You get people that go, why, I plead guilty to punching a police officer, or whatever you're claiming. And so they get a slap on the wrist, but then they get to go, they knew it. They pled guilty. We told you they're terrorists. Antifa admitting their terrorism. That's the way they do this. Watch as this plays out. Neither of the 2 people now charged with federal material support for terrorism were Neither of the 2 people now charged today with federal material support for terrorism were arrested at the detention center. So these are the main 2 people that they're trying to claim are the impetus for this, and they didn't even get arrested on the scene. They went back around and made this the case because I think they're trying to build out the narrative. That's what I think. Members of a support committee for friends and loved ones of the arrestees fear that further federal terrorism and other hefty charges are in the pipeline. They clearly were, because they're just spreading it out to as many people as they can find. While there is no such thing as a terrorism designation for domestic organizations, and while there is no centralized formal organization known as Antifa, by associating the Antifa label and anti-fascism activism with terrorism, Trump's administration can marshal and direct vast law enforcement powers and resources into investigating and targeting networks of left-wing activists. Or whoever it is can do that to whoever they want to aim it at, is the point. Whether it's a right or a left, or just the government can use left-wing narratives, right-wing narratives to go after people dissenting against government control. But the point to remember in all this, first of all, Antifa is not there's clearly organized elements. So it's frustrating that people can't even be honest about that. But at the same time, it's not all one national thing. There's plenty of black bloc groups that they're not Antifa, like registered charter members. They're just groups that go out and do this. But yes, practice the same things, maybe get funding from certain groups. The point at the end of the day, it's dishonest to claim it's all one thing or that it doesn't exist. As usual, isn't it? As usual, we're in the middle going, it's a little bit of nuance. It's typical, even though it's usually the right reality, the actual reality. So then on top of that, the domestic terrorism thing, I thought this was interesting. Right now, you ask a Democrat, partisan, or specifically a Republican, they're going to tell you that Antifa has been designated a terrorist organization. It's not true. Trump wrote an executive order that does not do that. The State Department has to do this. And at the end of the day, that's not a legal designation. But what it does by using the executive order is open up actions he can take against it. But so think about that. There is no such thing as a terrorism designation for a domestic organization. That's why they're trying to connect it to a foreign terrorist organization so they can actually have a State Department designation for Antifa. I feel like that's coming. But it says by associating them, they can aim it at whoever they want, whenever they want, whether it's the next Democrat or Republican. The terrorism label has, after all, always been a tool for the government, all of it, to categorize ideological enemies, foreign and abroad, and deploy extraordinary resources to target them. At another preliminary hearing in July, prosecutors said that as many as 200 FBI agents were working on this one case. Think about how stupid that is. A massive overreach for a singular shooting incident leading to a minor injury in the context of a protest. I mean, why wouldn't you put those people on the Epstein case? Why wouldn't you put them on the January 6th case? Why wouldn't you put them on any number of cases that people are screaming about that you're not following through on? Because this is about building the narrative, guys. That's what seems to be his job. This appears to be, it says, quote, an investigation by proclamation instead of investigation by sound intelligence, according to Thomas Brzezowski, a former Justice Department lawyer working on domestic terrorism. And he told the New York Times on Thursday, he told him this in reference to the government's treatment of the Texas defendants as an enterprise. He says, quote, that's what happens, he said, of Trump's targeting Antifa when you open such a broad investigation into what is essentially an idea. It's exactly what it is. The war on terror. Come home. As all of us were telling you, and really had always has been. But you can't win a war. You can't fight a war on drugs or war on terror, or I mean terror more specifically. What do you mean terror? You're fighting terror. So the reality being, you could never actually end that war because there's no real endpoint to. There's always terror out there. That's how these are set up. Now, on testing for repression, gunshots were fired and a police officer was injured in this incident. The government has pitched the activists as heavily armed, even though, aside from a small number of guns found near the detention center, the guns found were in cars and homes of the defendants. You see how insanely stupid this is? So you have one person shooting who seems to be, at least they claim, not connected to any of them. Then you have them, Bondi and the rest, claim it's heavily armed Antifa. So you get all the screamers out there that say clearly it's a terrorist organization. And it turns out that they just had guns that were at home in their cars. I lived in Texas, guys. It's not unique. I mean, why would you have to make that up? Why would you have to pretend they're heavily armed when all you're doing is finding a gun at their house and claiming that they are? It's just flat dishonesty because they're lying to you. That should be pretty self-evident. If they lie about something like that, then they're at least trying to bolster the story because they know it's not believable. Yet the Texas case reveals precisely the strategies the Trump administration will use, with the assistance of state forces, to target whole movements and communities with prosecutorial overreach and a logic of guilt by association. Government action here has been extreme in its treatment of an array of normal First Amendment protected activities as evidence of terrorism. This is what I was saying before. So because you claim this is a terrorist act, therefore being present in a protest becomes terrorism by support or whatever it is. You're literally illegalizing protected acts. The blunt force effort to treat anti-fascism, or my point is to treat resistance to the government agenda in any side, in any case, as terrorism should worry us all. Even those who may want to distance themselves from any notion of protest militancy. Now it says, during preliminary hearings, prosecutors have pointed to the flimsiest of grounds to describe organizers as terroristic enterprise, including references to typical and legal activities, activist activities like making zins and using encrypted messaging apps. I mean, guys, everybody, especially people in this field, we all use Signal. We all use these things. And now they're starting to use that as the claim that proves you're doing something wrong. It's just we know that you're spying on us. That's why that exists. Now, it goes on to say Thursday's indictment explicitly cites the use of encrypted disappearing messages, a practice that is common for activists and gossiping friend groups alike. The prosecutors also note that activists discussed bringing firearms to the scene. Now, you see, to average people, weirdly more Democrats than anybody, would see that as indicative of violence, even though they don't understand the reality of that. Most Republicans, but I would argue most Americans, understand the constitutional reality of that. Most importantly, people in Texas. It says, which, by the way, is completely legal in Texas. Also legal in Tennessee. It's concealed carry legal in this state. The point being is that people do that all the time. I do that all the time when we're talking about protests where people, when there's contentious things going on. The point is that I'm protecting myself. It's my legal right. People can decide to do it for themselves. It's legal in this state for people to arm themselves. And so the point is for them to discuss bringing something like that to a protest is only weird in the minds of people trying to convince you that it's wrong. And weirdly, who's doing that right now? Republicans. Republicans want you to think they're terrorists because they talked about bringing guns to a state where it's legal, to a protest where it'd be legal to do so. Are they fighting for the Second Amendment? Come on, guys. We got to stop lying to ourselves about what we're watching. It says, according to the indictment, one message described the plan to bring rifles to the protest as a way to have police back off. That is a defensive tactic. We've seen this from people like, what's the group? One of those militia groups. It was actually pretty prominent in Trump's last administration, who would show up protest with their guns in places where that was legal, you understand. And so the point was they were doing that to make a statement. Like, look, you just give us our space, which you can think that's so crazy. It's also constitutionally protected, which matters. It says, according to the support committee, the state was provided no evidence that there was coordination to fire at police. Right? So they're manufacturing this. Even if these people broke the law in some way, they're manufacturing the argument that there was terrorism because of one person firing a gun. I think that's pretty self-evident. Now, in the overlap of the FBI October discussion, which I'm going to be keeping an eye on this as best I can. Let me know if we miss any, if something comes up that I don't see. But the truth is that this is, I mean, where it goes will make all the difference, and what they release will make all the difference. But I'm going to put a pin in it. I just want to reiterate this since we're talking about them. We covered this on the 3rd of November. Remember, don't forget that the lawyer, which again, lawyers can lie, came out very early and said that they basically are describing a plot that never existed. And don't forget, that's even what the FBI said. We didn't know when, where, or how. That's their statement, by the way. I mean, so all you really have are people in a chat room who legally fire guns at a range, who you claim are discussing ISIS things. I mean, I've said every time, they could dump information on us that would make it all make sense. If they wanted to, they could do it right now. So as of right now, what we have in front of us from an agency that's lied more than anything seems to be dishonest, seems to be manufacturing. This is from the first Halloween terror suspect's lawyer says FBI jumped the gun. These kids are just gamers. Now, this is the newest one. This is from yesterday. Now, I found this interesting. ABC, it says Chicago's Pride Parade last year was eyed as a possible place for a terror attack. It says court documents have now suddenly revealed that suspects in this very October attack, the plot that was stopped before it even happened, posted in a social media platform that they claim is specifically for ISIS supporters and mentioned conducting a random terror attack on the Pride Parade. Again, all of the things, right? Why wouldn't this have been brought up in the first place? Are you telling me you only just discovered a totally new chat room that they claim is called Islamic State of America? Where was this the first time? So you're telling us you arrested these people for Pumpkin Day and having legal guns because maybe ISIS stuff, but you didn't know at the time there was an ISIS promoting chat room where they were discussing attacking a gay pride parade a year ago? This feels highly manufactured after the fact. In any case, we don't know because no one's releasing any information. What I think is interesting is, aren't they trying to argue that these are lefty terrorists, yet they're bombing pride parades? If that's even the reality. Like, so even if this is a true story, are you trying to suggest that we're talking about a right-wing attack here? Now, I'm not ever trying to make that case. It doesn't, to me, it's quite irrelevant other than who is driving extreme action, which we'll get to in a second with the Thomas Crook point. But this feels weird as hell to me. No, this is from yesterday. This is the details were included in an amended criminal complaint. See, so they went back and literally altered the original criminal complaint. Okay, so how does that make sense? You tell me you stumbled into this thing? Like, at this point, guys, with what they're altering, what you can do, like, if we never get any more information, this should be laughed at. Investigators are now saying they believe the suspects have been scouting possible LGBTQ communities for some of these attacks in Chicago. I find that to be shockingly inconsistent with what they're framing it as, what Kash Patel has been framing it as. So that's where we are at the moment. As far as I'm concerned, we're going to leave it there until we get more information, but I'm going to keep following up on it. But I'm telling you, it feels exactly the same as the one we went through. I went over that one in the show before that, where there's no real proof that these people did anything other than just discuss these things, and they jumped on it and said they were about to do it because of these claims we made and prove that in court. I find that hard to believe. Now, here's what they're actually doing. You know, like the big sandwich caper, right? They're really breaking down the real big stuff. So Pam Bondi post this on the 15th today. Thanks to the great work of the FBI, Marshal Services, the suspect wanted in the attack, which as far as I understand it was verbal, but again, I haven't really seen much to come out on this, on her office is now in custody. No one will get away with threatening or intimidating, you see my point, Yes, not an attack, by the way, unless you're talking in the lefty Democrat mindset, right? Where words are violence, which is what they're doing. Don't forget, Bondi told you that words are violence when the Charlie Kirk overlap, even though she directly contradicted what Kirk was saying about free speech when she used his name to fight against free speech. She says, or intimidating our great U.S. attorneys or destruction of their offices. Okay. Big news. No one's been, you're basically arresting somebody under an allegation. Why is this 17 overlaps where she posted, you quote tweeted, Cash goes on top, Dan shares it after that and goes, we're all changing the world. What actually happened is you arrested somebody. Nothing's changed yet. This feels so desperate, it's embarrassing. U.S. Attorney Haba says, we got him. The Justice Department under Pam Bondi and our federal partners will not tolerate any acts of intimidation or violence toward law enforcement. So grateful the FBI, their tireless work to capture him. Was some massive caper hunt? No, this seems like a random guy. Like, this is not some intelligence. This is so embarrassing to me that this is the way that they're framing this. I said, amazing how fast they can work when somebody uses mean words. If only they worked this hard to expose the Epstein files, track down sexual predators, or arrest literally anyone that they keep yelling about. Because Cash shared that. Today's arrest shows what coordinated federal law enforcement can do. Threats against the U.S. attorneys aren't just attacks on individuals, they're attacks on the rule of law. Right, because no one's above the law, right, Cash Patel? You mean other than people, I'll try to jump ahead wherever that was, like the Israeli child predator that you guys let go, or any number of other overlaps like the Epstein files that you aren't going after? Well, interestingly enough, wait, I jumped that ahead. Where was that? Damn it. I'll do this right here. Asking Grok, what's a full list of the people that MAGA claim will be arrested? Take a look at this list. I mean, we can go back to Jones and the big news in 2024 and him saying that Klaus Schwab and Gates were all coming down if we can just keep Trump alive. We'll read the list. Obama, Biden, Clinton, Pelosi, Newsom, Schiff, Cheney, Bush, Clinton, Maxine Waters, John Podesta, Anthony Weiner. Like, really? Not a single one, not one. And that's actually what it says as well. But any one of these people, some of them have been given some charges that seem designed to fail. But look at all these names. Fauci. It goes on forever, guys. Soros, Bill Gates. And simply asked, no, none of the individuals on the list have been arrested, which you guys all know. But he'll sure as hell yell about the sandwich, the great sandwich caper of 2025, when ultimately the court threw it out because it was embarrassing. Or this allegation against somebody who apparently yelled, or, this is a complete, like they're trying to, what's the right word for that? It's like not a dog and pony show, but it's an illusion. There's a word I'm trying to remember for that. But, that's why they point to it and she shares it. And then they share both those together and then they make a post about it and go, look, we're changing the world. Well, Jimmy Dore also points out, you might have seen this, Cash Patel's in full meltdown, a real mask-off moment for the free speech Trump administration. He is now suing Elijah Schaffer. And interestingly enough, in that lawsuit, apparently he claims anyway that he was doxxed, which means personal information was gone. Think about how many of these people have screeched about doxing and that they would turn right around and do it back, which is pretty Israeli of them. But it says the FBI Director Cash Patel's proxy lawsuit was meant to intimidate me and silence my online voice. This is because he is calling out his girlfriend, or whatever you want to call the honeypot that he's dealing in. And think about that with the assistant, that Stephen Miller's and all what's going on right there. The point is that this is them suing him for this person discussing things that he has every right to discuss. Sure, free speech. I agree with Jimmy. It's quite an illusion. And Alex Jones, funny enough, this is what I find humorous, has on Schaefer as well to talk about it. Now, what you're going to notice right now is there's a ton of these people who have been consistently chilling for what we've been calling out, who are now, and have been slowly, but trying to shift and go, we are calling it out now because we've got the biggest audience and we can stand up and act like we've been the ones doing it the whole time. No, look, even if you think that they finally start to call it out, whether let's just say Jones goes, Trump's the bad guy and Israel is, part of the problem, whatever it is. And it's genuine, let's say. You still have to look back over the last year and say, look at how crazy that was. Look at how many times he lied. Look at the times where he knew he was lying and tried to sell you on Trump anyway. Look at how many times he gaslit people who were doing the right thing over and over. You can't just ignore that. That's not about content. That's about personal. That's about principle. That's about a lack of integrity. That's what you have to remember about people like this. But so suddenly, Jones says, it's a hostile takeover. Elijah Schaffer warns, guess what? The Trump administration is compromised, and they've now turned their guns back on us. Oh, now it happened, huh? Suddenly, the thing that we've all been calling out that you've been lying about this entire time, suddenly is happening. Probably because Candace Owens came out and made a huge statement about not supporting Trump. And now he knows everyone. I mean, maybe he didn't see that everyone knew it. I don't know. But isn't this insulting? It didn't, as David Icke is going to say, it didn't just happen today. It didn't just suddenly start. This guy is now just feeling like he has to point it out because his entire following is falling apart because he's lying to your face. And it says, Alex Jones calls on putting major pressure on the correct course. You see, correct course. Like we can just go, okay, Israel bad now. Now we're back on course, which they'll all say. Jones included. Jones first. I'm telling you. Correct course before it's too late. Okay, what exactly would be too late, right? The complete selling out to Israel, right? The absolutely not America first actions, the ongoing COVID-19 shot, the fake food, the compromising of the entire Maha movement. We're going to correct those and keep going? How exactly would that be? You mean he's going to come out and go, I lied about everything. Every action now is the other direction. And we're going to go, yay. Shouldn't we go, boo, you lied to us. You're out of office now. That's what Jones is doing. He's lying the whole time and now going, the thing. We should go, boo, you lied to us the whole time. That's what should be happening right now. But this is how this goes. Kash Patel's bizarre anti-free speech lawsuit. You're just now waking up to this? Well, David Icke says they still haven't sussed that the course direction that they want correcting was planned all along. See, Jones can keep trying to kind of grift into what currently, but people like David not going to let it go because what he's doing is trying to step on part of it while keep you pulled back into the lie. That's what I think he's always done. Here's another one where it says, Alex Jones issues dire warning to Netanyahu, his Israel first Mossad agents. Seriously, man? Triggering a worldwide conflict of civilizations will destroy humanity. And guess who he thinks is going to save the day? Donald Trump. Not a joke. This is deserving of ridicule, guys. Dire warning to Netanyahu, you better stop what? What him and Trump are absolutely doing together, just like him and Biden were doing it together, just like the U.S. government was doing with whoever. Yes. But this is about trying to call out the thing while hiding the most important part. Not Trump, though. Not the team, though. Not Zionism infiltrating our country, though. Not globalism, technocracy that you've pretended to call out your entire career. Not that, though. David Icke says, will someone tell him his heroes, Trump and Musk, are owned by Israel along with Trump's picks for government? Yeah, and I think David knows too. He knows. I think we both know that Alex knows. It's about trying to point out a point or to make a point to get people to ask the questions. This is the image he used for that post. Calling out Netanyahu. I mean, come on, how embarrassing. Yeah, I mean, you have done more for the Israeli agenda in this country than just about any other podcaster that I know of right now. Except maybe Laura Loomer. Well, I take it back because Loomer has been so bombastically stupid that it's actually hurt the agenda. But this is what they're all doing. She goes on Bannon's War Room after a fresh plastic surgery update. Laura Loomer, America first means cutting Israel aid and forcing true sovereignty. Oh, you're so brave, Laura. When did you piece that together? After the last couple of years of selling out to Israel or just the last couple of months? Right. Cutting Israel aid, even though that's not what's happening. They're working out ways to maintain 20 years of continual aid while acting like they're weaning off of it. They're lying to you. And they're using people like Laura to come out and go, I finally see it. We need to get away from Israel, even though everything she is about driving you to support Israel and their agendas. But they'll sure as hell stand there and act like what they're trying to do is co-opt the movement, the momentum, like they do every time. I don't think it's going to work. Right now, that momentum is you're all hiding the Epstein files. That momentum is the government's lying to us every which way, left or right. That momentum is that the current Trump administration is lying about everything they're doing. You're not going to be able to co-opt that, Laura, but they're going to try. Maybe another $7,000 bonus. But here is what Mike Eagleman said. I guess the new Gunther Eagleman, kind of an overlap. He says, Laura Loomer has been right about everything and everyone. I said, some people are just on another planet. A very inaccurate, hyperbolic, Zionist-controlled planet. Hashtag two-party illusion. I mean, this is part of it, I think. Laura's right, even though she's been wrong about a time. It's just like Alex Jones. They say that, but the truth is you can watch day to day how wrong they are about almost everything. And the end of the day, Loomer is just being presented as the one that finally sees it. It's a game. Don't fall for it, which I don't think I even need to say, quite frankly. And this is a super important overlap. You probably have seen the Tucker Carlson clip, and I'm going to play a good portion of it. And I'm going to stop and point things out, but it's about 30-something minutes. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it's very much worth your time. I'll make my point about the one criticism I have, but I think it's very well done. And again, my point is always, as much as I have very, very clear skepticism towards everything he is, and people the content, if accurate, if correct, I'll still point to. As always, with the asterisk of saying I think he might be lying to you or using the truth to get you on his side, doesn't change the fact that the content is very well done. And I think very uncomfortable for most conservatives right now. As much as he tries to pull one punch toward the other side, you'll see what I mean. So this is just first, the point is that he puts this content out. Tucker Carlson on the 14th. Who is Thomas Crooks? You haven't heard a peep about this. In fact, you've heard from from which you'll hear this in some of Tucker's show, that the previous or the current FBI have been doing nothing. They've been hiding behind, we have to wait for the trial to finish, even though it appears that's not even in the cards. So they're trying to put this to bed. Why is the real question. Now, obviously, from my perspective, this is a whole of government thing. It's not left versus the right. It's clearly that the government, whether it's covering for an Israel overlap or it's something that the point is that all of it, that's why both sides, both FBIs for both, or just the FBI of the government, has kept this under wraps. Now, there's a lot of unknowns in this story more than anything. But after Tucker comes out, Kash Patel rushes out. So does Dan Bongino, by the way. They both posted basically the same thing. And he goes, Crooks case overview. Over 480 FBI employees were involved in the Thomas Crooks investigation. Employees conduct over 1,000 interviews, address 2,000 topics. Okay, just 13 seized devices, analyzed. Okay, where is all this stuff, though? Why haven't anybody gotten the information? The FBI's investigation into Crooks identified and examined over 20 online accounts. So he's just going, I did this and we did that. Okay. The investigation conducted by over 480 employees, you already said that up there, revealed Crooks had limited online and personal interactions. Oops. That's one right there that comes out really hard in this video, which he may not even watch, by the way. So that's important to read because he's lying or he doesn't know. Either way, that's alarming. You'll see why. Planned and conducted the attack alone and did not leak or share the intent to engage. Well, most of that seems to be the narrative. Right? So this is the 9/11 story, right? This is what you're supposed to sell people on, from the government to the American people, not the left about the right or anything like that. The left and right of all of your government lying to you about 9/11, lying to you about JFK, lying to you about these kind of large stories, all of which weirdly connect back to Israel. What do you know? So here is what 5 times August says. Sits, waits, does nothing, watches Tucker Carlson segment. Now, hey guys, I've got some information about the whole Thomas Crooks thing. Exactly. Like so embarrassingly reactive that I guess he doesn't see that we all recognize exactly what he is. So here, let's take a look at this clip. Very well done. And I'll stop it a few times here and there. Now, again, the major point that I want to highlight before we get started is that Thomas Crooks, according to everything we can see, if you want to argue that he ended up being a Democrat, whatever that means, then you have to admit that he started as a Republican, or that none of them are true and that his opinions varied. But the point is that the argument becomes that they lied about him being a Republican, even though the case he makes is very clear. He's a hardcore Trump supporter, very anti-immigration, calling to kill Democrat politicians. And then COVID comes around and he hates that people, it seems like he buys into COVID narratives. And then he turns on Trump, he calls the entire right movement through that a cult, which it is on both sides. But then ends up whatever ended up happening. The point is that if you're going to pretend that he got like radicalized by the left, I guess, lying about COVID, well, don't forget the right did too. But also that wasn't him, some benign kid out there picking daisies that suddenly goes, now I'm going to kill Trump. Clearly he was, I'm going to kill Democrats. Kill all the immigrants. That's the kind of stuff he was saying. And then just turned into another kind of crazy. If any of that's even real to begin with. The point though, is that if you're going to claim he was radicalized, it was by the partisan game, left or right. And then was just used accordingly in a certain circumstance, because that's, if you really understand how this works, how it's always been done. people that are played in the partisan game and how the government uses you to keep a certain thing going. So let's play the clip.
These are videos the FBI has worked hard to make sure you haven't seen. They're from the Google Drive account of Thomas Crooks, the man who on July 13th, 2024, showed up at the Butler County, Pennsylvania fairgrounds and tried to assassinate the frontrunner, Donald Trump.
And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Just since it's so early, I still think that the sound, the lack of movement, you know what I mean? Like, we'll get into at the end part of this, like where, just briefly about, whether this, who knows what happened here. There's so much to criticize, so much inconsistency. And I mean, like, provable. For example, where you claim he was and where Trump's head was at when the shot was allegedly taken. It's impossible. It's just not how, you could argue, for example, that when the shot hit somewhere else and there was some shrapnel that came out in the beginning as one of the points that both sides were considering. And so if something hit and shrapnel flew and nicked his ear, that would kind of make sense. A little bit of blood came out. There wasn't much of a scar, but then he turned it into some massive thing. You see, it doesn't always have to be the extreme conspiracy narrative. It could just be that there's something else to the story. My point, though, is that it seems pretty clear. Like, if he was shot, there'd be more movement than that. No, again, it's not even about that in this point. I'm just fascinated by how easy it is to sell people, especially those who pretend to be, the ones seeing the conspiracies, on exactly that. But it's more so about how they've lied and covered up what you can prove about Crooks, which very clearly speaks to both sides, both Kash Patel and Wray in the FBI, both Trump and Biden, which speaks for itself when you really understand the game. Oops, that was an accident.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
That day, Thomas Crooks came within a quarter inch of destroying this country. And yet, a year and a half later, we still know almost nothing about him or why he did it. That's because, for some reason, the FBI, even the current FBI, doesn't want us to know.
What's up?
Since the start of their investigation, the FBI has claimed that Thomas Crooks acted alone and that he was a virtual ghost online with no presence at all.
Which is what Kash just reiterated, right? And so when we got to the point that this is something that both sides are hiding from you, that needs to make you question whatever this just was. Now, look, it could be that it's exactly what they said happened, and that yet the person turned out to be a Republican and they wanted to hide that from you. I mean, again, it could be simpler than the largest answer, the hypothetical, right? But it's pretty clear to me, as it is to most honest people, that there's something pretty damn fishy about this whole thing.
Their only substantive claim about Crooks's motive was that he was a right-winger. We learned that from FBI Deputy Director Paula Bate, who said this to Congress just 1 month after the attempted assassination.
Something just very recently uncovered that I want to share is a social media account which is believed to be associated with the shooter in about the 2019-2020 timeframe. There were over 700 comments posted from this account. Some of these comments, if ultimately attributable to the shooter, appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes, to espouse political violence, and are described as extreme in nature.
The social media account Abate was describing was Crooks's YouTube comments. When the FBI made that claim, we had to take his word for it. We have no way to check, but now we do. In September, we obtained hundreds of comments from Thomas Crooks's YouTube account. Since then, we've gone to great lengths to verify that they're real. We can now confidently say they are. These are genuine, written by Thomas Crooks. But although Crooks's comments are interesting and give tremendous insight into why he did it, they're not the only story. The other story, in fact, the far more significant story, involves the government. the DOJ, and the FBI, which have hidden from the public what they know about Thomas Crooks. The purpose of this report is to reveal details of Crooks's social media accounts and to confront a series of key questions. Why is the FBI keeping Crooks's views a secret? Why are they ignoring congressional subpoenas to divulge information? Why are they pretending that there's nothing to see here? And more than anything, what are they hiding?
And I hope it's clear that's both, right? That's current FBI and the previous, as he makes even more clear as it goes forward.
Before we present our findings, it's critical to establish how we obtained the comments and how we know they're real. In late September, we received a tip from a source. He told us he'd gained access to some of Thomas Crooks's accounts. He'd found these accounts by utilizing tools commonly used by private investigators. The key lead was Thomas Crooks's phone number. That was published in documents obtained by America First Legal. That phone number led our source to Thomas Crooks's primary email account, tmcrooks7@gmail.com. That in turn, he linked with more than a dozen other accounts. That list includes 2 foreign encrypted email accounts, AmericanGamer@gmx.com, a German website, and bcook@mailfence.com.
I just remember that, a German gaming site, right? So just remember that, because it comes up later as a foreign connection. It's kind of like, well, I mean, I post on VK, for example, doesn't mean I'm Russian connected, right? It's like, it's just remember, we'll come back to it.
Belgian website. Crooks had a Snapchat, Tom_Crooks19, a Venmo account, Thomas-Crooks12, a PayPal account under the alias Rod Swanson, a Zelle registered as Thomas Crooks, as well as accounts on Discord, a Google Play account called Colossal Microwave, a Quizlet titled Thomas_Crooks, a chess.com with the same name, and 2 disabled Quora accounts under the handles Thomas Crooks8 and Thomas Crooks3. It turns out that Thomas Crooks was hardly an online ghost. He was active, and yet federal investigators lied and told us there was no trace of him online. Some of Crooks's accounts, like his Snapchat, appear to have been fully deactivated and completely taken out of use. Some of them may have been unused or cleared by federal officials during the investigation. We don't know because the FBI wouldn't tell us.
It's also just worth reiterating again what he just said. So right there, you can see that. I mean, there's tons of accounts, none of which have been released. And as he wrote here, the FBI's investigation into Crooks identified and examined over 20 online accounts, data extracted from over a dozen electronic devices. It was revealed Crooks had limited online and in-person interactions. That's just not true, right? They say they had 20 accounts, but if you have 20 online accounts, how are you going to claim they had limited online engagement? That just doesn't seem to be the case. But I think it's because you're trying to paint a picture, which is there's no there, right? There's just, he had this Gmail account, but there's nothing there, even though there clearly was, including all the YouTube data that Tucker's pointing to that they have yet to point to, even though he can prove that they knew about it. Ah, dang it. Sorry, I just hit that. This will be a little bit out of place. I accidentally just bumped the thing again. Hold on.
Uses actual.
Let me get it back to where it was. Where were we? There we go.
There was no trace of him online. Some of Crooks's accounts, like his Snapchat, appear to have been fully deactivated and completely taken out of use. Some of them may have been unused or cleared by federal officials during the investigation. We don't know because the FBI wouldn't tell us. However, our source was able to retrieve all data from Thomas Crooks's deactivated YouTube account, TomCrooks2178, visible to other users as Tom Crooks. This account includes his search history, his watch history, and 737 public comments. Another critical account, his Google Drive, is linked to an archive of Crooks's YouTube account. That's where our source obtained the videos of Crooks dry firing a handgun in his bedroom with paper targets on the wall behind him. But aside from the...
Is it just me, or does that sound like a pellet gun? Maybe it's just the way the audio sounds, but it's just weird. It sounds like they say it's dry firing at paper targets in your room. What does that even mean? You don't need paper targets to dry fire a gun. I just think that's odd. Maybe it's just the sound. Not a small point, but if you hear it, it sounds to me like a cap gun, like a pellet gun.
That's where our source obtained the videos of Crooks dry firing a handgun in his bedroom with paper targets on the wall behind him. But aside from the video evidence, the email addresses, and the phone number tying Crooks to the account, or the fact that most of these accounts use his actual name, there are other key details that support the authenticity of what we found. For example, this video's metadata shows it was filmed at Thomas Crooks's parents' home. And some of Crooks's YouTube comments are still available on Internet Archive sites. Crooks's YouTube channel was suspended on July 14th, 2024. That's the day after the shooting. Its offense, quote, violating YouTube's policy on violent criminal organizations. And though Crooks's comments are no longer available on YouTube, in many cases, the commenters who responded to Crooks are still there.
Think about this in regard to a violent terrorist organization. What? One person carries out an event that, you know, so it's not an organization, but you see this, what that needs to show you is their willingness to apply that to anything. You have, let's just even say it's exactly what they said happened, that this kid lost his mind, shot at the president. How is that a terrorist organization, a violent terrorist organization? That's the guys they use to take down his entire account. It's because they're just covering up information, guys. That's not a terrorist organization. And in fact, that's public, public data. Unless those comments are violating some rule, they should be left alone, but they never do. And this is the excuse they used. So when they level these things at these people at protest and you're all terrorists, think about how willing they are to level that when there's nothing to back that up at all. There's no organization here. Not that they can prove anyway. It seems to be one person.
And they match what we see on the Internet Archive sites. When you click on their tags of Crooks's accounts, YouTube takes you to a page that says, this channel was removed because it violated our community guidelines. In other words, there is ample evidence to support the authenticity of these posts. Our source figured it out. So did we. But when we reached out directly to the FBI to ask why the Bureau hadn't shared any details from the account with the public.
For the podcast, Tucker showing Kash Patel right there.
The FBI responded by questioning whether we could verify the authenticity of the count. We were confused by this, considering the authenticity is self-evident. And of course, the FBI would have known that since the day of the shooting. What exactly is the FBI hiding?
Just this very line of thought, even if it ends up being, that this was a Democrat, but this current FBI is covering up for some reason. I mean, that's going to bring Tucker a lot of negative attention, which, I mean, that's what, somebody, a person doing this kind of work should not care about that. It should be about the truth. But it's interesting to think about what we're seeing in the conversation today, right? Seeing with basically like a huge portion of the Israel right screaming about how Tucker Carlson's the worst person alive. I'm still not sure whether that's some kind of organized effort or not, but he has been calling out things that I agree with calling out, and I'm glad to see it. But just thinking about that alone, you're going to get some of these hardcore blind Trump supporters. If Trump decides to stand with Kash, they're going to go after Tucker like scorched earth, like they're doing with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Massey and Rand Paul and everybody else who is not blind supporting of Trump.
Here's what we do know. The digital comments we obtained were posted between 2019 and 2020, when Thomas Crooks was between 15 and 17 years old. They show two things. First, that Thomas Crooks was not some secretive lone wolf who never warned anyone that he was planning violence, just the opposite. Years before he showed up in...
This is wild. He goes on to make a very clear overlap of all the times he openly threatened to take out politicians. And the FBI didn't do anything about that. This is, the point is that you can see historically that if there ever was an opportunity, now my opinion on that, but if there ever was an opportunity to stop somebody who was planning, who was, clearly this is something that they either let happen or not able to see in the first place. But it's important to see how this was something that was well on the record. And again, as he says, they had access to this beforehand.
Butler, Crooks was leaving a detailed digital trail of violent threats, including calls for assassinations and political violence. Second, they show a man who started out as a radical Trump supporter whose views on the president changed completely during COVID. The FBI lied about that fact and pretended that Crooks was a right-winger.
Yeah, but see, how can you say that right there? Right? I really want to stress this point, guys. How can you say that they lied about him being a right-winger when you can clearly see that he was, as you yourself, Tucker, called him a radical Trump supporter? So if you're going to be accurate, I feel like that's a bone to the people that want to hear he's a Democrat. The right response would be that he was a Republican who then became a Democrat, or rather he was somebody who supported Trump who then recognized that he was being misled by Trump. Even if that's not true, that's what he felt, as you'll see. So how do you call him not a Republican? When the case is it's both, if you're being honest, or none. You see what I'm saying? That's a really weird thing. To me, if you're going to be honest about how it all looks, it appears to be somebody who was very like a diehard radical partisan, was calling to kill people on the Democrat side, just like there are lefties calling to kill people on the right side. Like, it's not unique, in my opinion. It can be more radical depending on what's going on in the world in different administrations, but it oscillates. And so that happened, and then he felt betrayed by the Trump movement. He says that. He says he called them a cult, and so he felt betrayed. And so you could argue he's a Republican who just felt betrayed by the Trump side and went after Trump. That makes far more sense than he just got radicalized by the Democrats, which is what the team sport Republicans are going to say, see, everything was fine when he was a radical Trump supporter. When he became a radical Democrat, that's when the violence started. Other than him openly calling to kill Democrat lawmakers, right? It's an effort to make it one thing. I just feel like that's dishonesty to me, but I'm glad everything else in this is pretty damn good.
At 11:35 p.m. on July 19th, 2019, in response to an MSNBC video, Crooks wrote, quote, Ilhan Omar and others are invaders and should honestly be killed and their dead bodies sent back. At 1:17
quite the Democrat.
a.m. on July 20th, 2019, Crooks commented on a CNN video. He said Donald Trump was the literal definition of patriotism. 7 hours later, he commented on an MSNBC video. He wrote, I hope a quick, painful death to all the deplorable immigrants and anti-Trump congresswomen who don't deserve anything this country has given them. That evening, on a separate MSNBC video, he wrote, quote, every one of the Trump-hating Democrats deserve to have their heads chopped off and put on stakes for the world to see what happens when you fuck with America.
How are you possibly going to frame this as anything other than a very clear Trump supporter, if not Republican? Right? I just think that's wild that you can start by saying they lied to us about being a Republican. I mean, unless I'm missing some kind of like weird way, like some kind of, he's making a point by saying the wrong. I don't know. It's like that to me felt very out of place with everything else in this video. But as he goes through, he then shifts during COVID-19. But that alone, there's no way you could argue that this was, that he wasn't a Republican at this point, or at the very least wasn't a Trump supporter. He was the most patriotic person alive. It's very clear what that is.
These sorts of comments continued for months and became increasingly violent. The following day, Crooks responded to a CBS Evening News video about the squad saying this, quote, this is going to be blatantly racist, but I hope Trump has these people murdered. Crooks openly called for dictatorship and
I'd also add, by the way, you can see a very clear window, or rather justification, for why Trump and his team wouldn't want this to be seen. Like, remember I said in the beginning, they could be as simple as that the whole effort to stifle all this was because they were worried that Democrats would frame it that way. Even though it's kind of both, right? That would make sense to me. It's always important to never jump to conclusions, right? If we don't have all the facts, we have to wait.
Putting, quote, Hispanics back in their place. He warned that if Democrats win in 2020, quote, they won't be in there for long because unlike the Dems, we have guns and lots of them. In one comment, Crooks noted that, quote, 50 million Americans with AR-15s will make quick work of any blockades the government can put in to protect the White House. He left multiple references to Mao Zedong's famous line, the only real political power comes from the barrel of a gun.
It also is uncomfortable for the January 6th overlap, right? With that exact point. That would be more than enough for them to try to keep this under wraps.
On September 30th, 2019, Crooks responded to comments about a potential civil war, saying this, most rioters don't bring assault rifles and body armor like we would, and we wouldn't be going to the streets, we'd be going to Washington. At this point, one user named Hyperpandas responded saying, quote, law enforcement will thank you for grouping up and being so visible. It'll make your arrest so much simpler. Crooks responded saying, cops can't arrest me if they're all dead. Before adding, even an untrained man with an AR-15 is dangerous. You think Adam Lanza or any school shooter trained? Nope. If you navigate to that YouTube page today, you can still see identical contextual comments and people referring to Thomas Crooks, including one user who wrote this, you're on YouTube threatening to shoot government officials. I sure hope the FBI is monitoring social media for violent nutcases. That exchange is still a school shooter trained? Nope. If you navigate to that YouTube page today, you can still see identical contextual comments and people referring to Thomas Crooks, including one user who wrote this: "You were on YouTube threatening to shoot government officials. I sure hope the FBI is monitoring."
It's funny how he cuts off the last part. He doesn't read Trump's cult is literally insane, which is what Crooks was actually arguing in the future posts. Interesting. But somebody points out in the chat, it's all a fabrication. This is all carefully crafted to make both parties obsolete, AI government to come. It's a very valid point to make, as much as some people might disregard that because they're not aware of where the world is going. Interesting thought, right? First, I was thinking, okay, same kind of idea that people might accuse Tucker of buying, that the Democrats, FBI faked all those comments. That's certainly possible, right? But that Tucker's one relaying this, claiming he vetted them all, is why I feel it's more relevant to the right to consider right now. But question everything, as always. Tucker could be wrong too. But I bet there were people that make that case. But the point that this is what I love about this, if people that are truly seeing the two-party illusion, right? It's not that it's all fabricated to blame the Republicans. It's fabricated to convince people that this is so many thoughts coming to mind, to convince people that the left-right paradigm or their political circumstance is not working, and that then rationalize the new thing. How many things we're showing you from Trump's administration are like this? Using something we want. So here I am going, see the two-party illusion, because we have to. It's paramount to change, but they know we're starting to see it. So they start to create the justification, hypothetically speaking, if this is where we're going, if what his point is accurate, that they create the justification to create AI government on the point that, look, both parties are too crazy. We have to do something new. Don't you think most Americans, because what I've been saying has been correct for years, are going to be, that makes sense because they see the left-right mania? I think that's very, very true. Now, I'm sure people disagree. I think that most Americans have been very aware of the two-party nonsense for quite a long time. And now it's starting to be co-opted because now it's the time for the change. Now is the time for their planned solution. It's like everything else, but great point to bring up.
Social media for violent nutcases. That exchange is still available on Internet Archive websites. But the FBI didn't see that before the shooting? That's hard to believe.
Yeah.
On various occasions, Crooks openly said things like, Mueller should be hanged along with the rest of the Democrats involved in that witch hunt. And I always believed being patriotic was lining up a bunch of socialist Jews, like the ones who booed Trump, and blasting their useless brains out with an AR. And yet, in early 2020, Crooks seemed to change radically. On January...
So COVID-19 starts, right? And you see a whole, you have to understand that from 1920, you saw Donald Trump sell us out in a COVID-19 sense. Operation Warp Speed. Come on. I mean, you have to be honest about this. Even conservatives they'll pull the punch for Trump, but they recognize where all that went. So you have somebody who is a diehard, they believe in the American principles. They believe, are clearly bigoted and racist and clearly blinded in a lot of things, but believes that Trump is patriotic. Trump is America first. Then he sells you out, pushes dangerous shots, shuts down the country, right? Even if you disagree with who, maybe that was all Fauci tricked him, whatever. He, as Crooks, you could argue, felt sold out. Honestly, I think that makes more sense than anything else.
23rd of that year, he referred to, quote, Trump's stupidity. He began to mock the concept of the deep state. He suggested it was a code word used by Trump supporters for, quote, anyone who disagrees with the right wing. Suddenly, he sounded like an MSNBC commentator. In February of 2020, he called out Trump supporters as, quote, too brainwashed to realize how dumb you are. I mean, literally, you guys sound like a cult at times.
Now, what's interesting is I will point out that that's a very hard swing. To go from, let's just say Trump did that and he felt, betrayed. I wouldn't argue that would then cascade into everybody in the movement. So it is interesting. It also could be argued that all of this is basically an operation from both sides of it. And that's why it's just a shift into the extreme left from the extreme right, or whatever you want to call it. It's all of this as the point from beginning, because we don't really know for sure. There's something wrong. I mean, if even Tucker is starting to point this out, then everyone knows that, guys. Everyone knows that. And all this is showing you is that he's calling them stupid and brainwashed. So, I mean, I just find it hard to believe that somebody would be like, I see them, now I'm completely on the other side. That feels weird, feels wrong.
That same day, he called Trump and his supporters, quote, racist. It was an amazing transformation. That April, during the peak phase of the coronavirus lockdowns, Crooks wrote, quote, it seems that you people don't understand that sometimes public safety comes before your personal rights. Are you not willing to quarantine one member of your family to save the rest?
See, so now he's a blind, he's on the lies of the COVID-19 discussion.
If so, you are not a patriot and you aren't protecting anything. Around this time, the new left-wing version of Thomas Crooks became very critical of conservative media. He said,
see, right there, I would pull away from, the idea that we always have to frame it as the left and the right of the situation. I mean, I know Republicans who felt that way. I know Democrats who supported Trump. I mean, it's just, it's so frustrating from the mainstream conversation that everything has to be carved in to one left or the right. Maybe the guy just changed his mind about something. Again, I just said what I thought about the weirdness of that, but it's also worth being objective and to not just, and I'm not saying Tucker's guaranteeing it's left and right. He's making an observation that it does. I agree. It seems left, but we as a society need to stop allowing that to be the catch-all, because it really does not define us today. And I think that's been, I mean, we'll probably, in 10 years, we'll probably finally see that, even though it's been happening for however long I've been calling it out. Right now, we're finally seeing the two-party illusion.
At one point, quote, going to a Chinese New Year's party in America isn't putting you at risk for coronavirus, because believe it or not, viruses don't spread through race like Tucker Carlson probably told you. That may,
which I don't think Tucker even said that, to be honest, which is just funny. Maybe the China point.
As state officials across the country overhauled election systems to promote mail-in voting, Crooks attacked Republican concerns about voter fraud as, quote, ignorant. 4 months later, in August 2020, his tone had shifted even further to the left. He said, quote, I believe the outcome will be irrelevant. In response to the same video, Thomas Crooks issued what sounds a lot like a digital manifesto. Quote, in my opinion, the only way to fight the government is with terrorism-style attacks. Sneak a bomb into an essential building and set it off before anyone sees you. Track down any important people or politicians, military leaders, etc., and try to assassinate them.
So, I mean, you could even argue that this kid is, when you get into like the weird stuff, the neuroscience and nanotech and stuff that very much exists despite how the society of our world doesn't want to acknowledge that, and how that can affect people's minds, or the voice of God technology from the CIA. These are not false things. You can prove these things. And so how that could affect somebody to do something, and doing something like this is perfect for the government agenda, for the Mossad, CIA, bi-trinational security state agenda, for the globalist technocratic takeover, or however you want to frame that very simple idea. The point is just that it checks all the boxes, aside from all the things that most people listening probably don't even agree with or believe in, despite how you can prove most of those things. This, what you can see on the screen, you know as well as I that very sentiment is exactly what both sides want to use to shut down your rights.
Any sort of head-to-head fight is suicide, and even ambush or surprise attacks likely aren't going to end well. These remarks were especially notable because they came at the final phase of Crooks's YouTube commenting. At that point, a new character emerged into the conversation, a user named Willie Tepes, who started pressuring Crooks to commit violence. For example, quote, if a gun and a badge is all that is needed, then authority obviously comes from the barrel of a gun. We have more guns than they do. There is no way we can avoid a war at this point, so you better just get used to the idea. We have nothing to lose and everything to win. And the alternative, a global police state, is unacceptable. Nothing in life is simple, but that is no argument against doing it. So who is this Willie Tepes?
See, to me, now that, that's coming from the Willie Tepes guy, but so it's like the idea of trying to mash together what seems to be a logical response to how crazy the world is getting with extreme irrational violence, right? It's sort of like calling things anarchism when really it's chaos. You're trying to take, like it's, for example, right now claiming that pushing back against government control, or the claim that, or just saying somebody's anti-capitalist, that's a potential terrorist event. These people are recognizing, not to say capitalism versus anything else, but just you have a right to think what you want and call out whatever you want. People are recognizing that the U.S. government is being oppressive, that is literally doing the things it claims it's fighting. And so by saying those things, they claim those are terrorist acts. Like that's what terrorists do, and you're working for Iran. It's what they do. And so I think that's what that comes down to, mashing it all together.
Unfortunately, we don't know. The FBI hasn't made any mention of him in public, although they certainly know he exists. Just days after the shooting, somebody screenshotted Tepes's YouTube account page, despite the fact he had very few followers. To the extent that he can be traced online now, you can find his username being used on a foreign Antifa website. Those sites link him to the Nordic resistance movement, which is...
Now, you know what's weird about this? Right there, what you're looking at is not, that's the, what is it, Atlantic Council, whatever site, that's a government-connected site. It's a weird thing to say, an Antifa-connected. So the point is, what's weird to me is, even if you're just listening and not really watching, you can take that as Antifa said that, which is really, that's a weird, what he's actually pointing to is that the Department of State from the U.S. government designated what they see, you can see right there, Nordic resistance movement. So like arguably more of a right-connected kind of ideology as a specially designated global terrorist, right? And so that's what he's saying, is that they connect him to that group, which would be, again, I'm not going to say that makes him necessarily right or left or Republican or Democrat, but it would be arguably more of a right-wing ideology. But the way he says that, it sounds like you're saying it's an Antifa left-wing thing. It's weird. Maybe deliberate.
We don't know. The FBI hasn't made any mention of him in public, although they certainly know he exists. Just days after the shooting, somebody screenshotted Tepes's YouTube account page, despite the fact he had very few followers. To the extent that he can be traced online now, you can find his username being used on a foreign Antifa website.
A foreign Antifa website. Now, excuse me, that's not Atlantic Council. That's the actual State Department website. A foreign Antifa website, which they don't show. Those are no link to.
Those sites link him to the Nordic resistance movement.
Those sites do, or just the State Department of the U.S. government, which is what you're pointing to. I mean, am I crazy, or does that feel like a very weird punch that's pulled right there? Maybe I'm just overthinking it.
Which has been designated a terrorist group by the U.S. State Department. That's all we know.
So not Antifa then, the State Department. I mean, I find that very weird.
We do know, however, that Crooks's online footprint abruptly ends after his encounter with this mysterious figure, Willie Tepes. Regardless of whoever Willie Tepes is or was and what his motives may have been, who he may have been working for, there is no doubt that Crooks was ripe for recruitment by someone. From early 2019 to mid-2020, as his political views were evolving, Crooks searched for Trump more than 700 times online. He also searched for Jack Ruby, the man who assassinated Lee Harvey Oswald. He then submitted queries for craziest chemical reactions, cars running over protesters, best places for mass shooting.
Do you realize how insane this is? So this speaks to one of two things. They either knew this kid was going to do something and let it happen, or were part of it, or they're so shockingly incompetent that everything they say they're using to scan and social media and surveil means nothing, because this kid, I mean, you couldn't have tried harder to check all the boxes, from posting comments about killing politicians to saying you're going to take out anybody. We have more guns. We're going to surround the White House. I mean, all of this stuff. Then searching for mass shootings and for, historical figures that are, I mean, come on. It's like you were trying to get noticed, or somebody was trying to make these breadcrumbs. I mean, it's just everything about this screams that it's just not an organic situation. I mean, and that's, again, why Tucker is doing this.
Mass shooting El Paso, Trump civil war, Orlando shooting reaction, firing an AR-15 as fast as possible.
But you can post from the river to the sea, or say Palestine needs to have its own state, and the FBI will come visit you immediately. Now, I mean, I'm kind of half joking, hyperbolic or facetiously, but we know that's what's going on right now. People are getting detained for traffic tickets because they're brown, or people are getting arrested because they wrote an op-ed about Israel. But this guy can literally threaten politicians, and I'm not even saying, my opinion about free speech, but the idea that you're writing out and searching for how to commit terrorist attacks, and yet that's who they go after? Meanwhile, Israeli pedophiles can go home, Come on, guys.
Fertilizer bomb, how to make napalm, how to make a Molotov cocktail, mass shooting Canada, Oklahoma bombing, and sniper in Dallas shooting. He also searched for American Nazi Party, German national anthem,
Another weird overlap, though. Half of these searches you could probably find on most independent media, because you're searching to see the events that took place that day, like the sniper Dallas shooting. That's what he was searching for, I imagine. Well, actually, no, I take that back. When was the timing of this? That's weird. I could be wrong on the timing, but either way, you could argue like today, or rather with the FBI, I could, Dallas shooting, FBI, right? Like that would be somebody trying to search and find out what happened. Just being objective, right?
1933, 1945, Hitler's speeches with subtitles, neo-Nazis, and, quote, why gays need to go. Hate to brag, but we're pretty confident this show.
Little advertisement. So let's jump to a couple more points, and I'm going to get past this. 2630. So there was one point I wanted to show you right here. Past the sun speaking.
Fortunately, the reality is that the FBI, as of today, is not only stonewalling, but is actively preventing an honest look at what happened in Butler within
the current FBI. So that is going to get him a lot of flack from the Trump administration.
Days of the shooting, FBI agents collected all the relevant surveillance footage. That includes footage from local businesses, the state police, and critically, the gun range where Thomas Crooks trained. Did he train alone? We don't know, because to this day, the FBI refuses to release the footage.
Why? Why? Especially since they keep claiming we can't do it until the trial's over, but that doesn't seem to be happening, as Tucker makes the point twice in this thing. That Kash Patel is claiming that we have to wait. But if there's nothing that's going to be happening, what are we waiting for? For us to forget, apparently. And one other part about Cash and Bondi.
What are they hiding? If the leadership of the FBI and the DOJ had any desire whatsoever to prove to the public that there's in fact nothing there, they could do that. But first they would have to answer these questions. Was Thomas Crooks known to federal law enforcement before the shooting? Was he known to local law enforcement before the shooting? And if not, why not? Who is Willie Tepes, and was he known to federal law enforcement? Is Willie Tepes linked to any violent organizations? Is he linked to any governments? And if so, then around the time of the shooting, did the FBI have assets inside those organizations? If Crooks wasn't known to anyone in authority before the shooting, how was he able to post hundreds of violent extremist comments under his real name between 2019 and 2020 without being detected by law enforcement or intel agencies at a time we know they were monitoring social media?
Very good question that I think we all know the answer to. They're either hiding it or they're incompetent. Now, the same thing with, for example, the October 31st point, right? I mean, or you could do with so many different examples that you literally have them, like we just talked about, how all of a sudden they go, oh, retroactively, we're adding another thing to the original document that says that they were going to do something a year ago at this LGBTQ place. Well, okay, so what, you mean you didn't know that in the first place? You're literally investigating these people for terrorist activities on this platform, and yet you just didn't know they were talking about that on the ISIS platform? It sounds completely made up to me. It sounds like they're literally manufacturing what they need to justify their actions, which, by the way, guys, is about the most common thing you're going to find in this country. Last part. Oh, wait, that can't be right.
They're not bulky nut who gave no indication he might do this. Then what is stopping the FBI from at least giving the facts to Congress? Because if there's nothing there, these should be very easy questions to answer.
Yeah, well, there's a part at the end where he does the same right-wing point, but I obviously I think this is a very, very well done piece of work. I mean, you're touching on things that are, I mean, again, that doesn't mean that he's doing it for good reasons. I mean, right now, very clearly, like I've been trying to highlight and signal for a year, this is shifting right now, and the system is losing control of it. And so if it's been going on that long, they see it too. They're trying to whoever, if that's the case with him, the government, for example, does see it. But so people like this are either starting to see the truth and call it out, which I hope so. I will hope that and look for that. But it's also possible that these people are using the truth to gain your trust for whatever they pull on you next, which is like what happened during COVID-19. And it doesn't have to mean that I'm criticizing. It's what you should think that about. Consider that about me. Consider that about everybody. Just simply ask, prove the content, and then be skeptical. Hold my feet to the fire. Make sure if I make a mistake, you call me out on it. That's how it has to go. Otherwise, not only will I not grow, but we will become comfortable and will fall into our partisan sides. And we have to be critical constantly. So I'll include the different shows we did, and there's probably more than this, but July 14th, Trump's assassination attempt. Let's review the facts. When I do that kind of title, that's just like a focus, and ultimately let's review what the facts show us. And at this point, I think it was inconsistent, clearly, but a lot of the things you pointed out here, like a lot of us did in the beginning, still stand to this very day. The 15th, we followed up. And this is Derek's article. We must question the attempted assassination of Trump. On the July 16th, 2024, Trump assassination attempt narrative continues to unravel as Israel intensifies Palestine genocide. And on the 18th, this one I think is important. This is where I really get into that angle nuance, which as far as I could tell, and it's just not just me saying this, I was one of the earliest people making that argument. I think it was, what's his name? The guy who used to wear the glasses and the hat all the time. He ended up doing a good job getting that some real attention. But the basic point was obvious from the very beginning. Trump turns his head. He looks at the screen, the prompter, and where he was supposed to be, you can draw a straight line. It's not possible for you to hit the back top right of his ear from that angle. It's just not. On top of that, you can prove that wherever they claim he was not exactly what you can see from people standing with their videos, that you're not able to see the rooftop from where they were. There's so many inconsistencies. But the point is, they're not even choosing to follow up. Evidence mounts showing official story on Trump shooting is false. And cancel culture from the right, all the way back there in July 18th, 2024. We also discussed this recently. This was the January 6th pipe bomber and conservatives' turn on Trump, which is what's happening, guys. And it's not about just conservatives. I honestly think we need to stand back and see that partisans, Americans, are starting to see through the two-party illusion. Now, it's varying. It comes in different groupings, but it's happening. We need to lean into that and see that we're on the same side as Americans who are being suppressed by our government. Now, we just pointed this out in the last show. This is about the January 6th pipe bomber investigation. Dan Bongino says, Congressman Massey, when Director Patel and I entered our duty, and we went briefly, I skimmed the other day. The point is, he goes through this long explanation, as we recently pointed to, about that, because no one's doing anything about it. And what's funny is, as axiomatic enemy of the state sums up perfectly, Bongino went with, we're not corrupt, we're just grossly incompetent defense. Exactly what I'm always telling you. They will always put themselves out as incompetent instead of criminal. They don't want to be seen as stupid, but they will happily take, I messed up, then I'm going to go to jail. Funny, though. And this is even his own post getting fact-checked. Massey's post cites the attorney's letter contradicting Dan Bongino's claim. Dan Bongino's reply shows call attempts, but doesn't refute Massey or address the letter, meaning that he didn't really dispute the claim. These people are drowning. This is Pete Hegseth posts yesterday. Operation Rough Rider equals freedom for navigation. Operation Midnight Hammer equals obliteration of Iranian nuclear sites. Operation Southern Spear. Most of these are misrepresentations about what's going on. Obliteration of nuclear sites? Nobody believes that. Nobody. Your own government admitted that's not what happened. And so too, they lied, guys. They lied. It was very embarrassing. And even before they did that, they had already admitted, his State Department, that they weren't seeking nuclear weapons. But this is what Jose Vega rightly points out. Pete Hegseth right now. This is exactly the sense that I get. These are people that are so desperate to be in the inner circle and so far outside of the know and so far outside of the skill set needed that they're playing at what they're doing. And I think that's evident with everything they're doing. Or things like this, for example. Kash Patel, in my opinion, is so desperate to try to make it seem like that he comes out and posts this, staying ready for the mission with FBI trainees. Well, I don't know. I'm not well-versed in the FBI dynamics, but I'm pretty sure the FBI director does not typically train FBI trainees. I'm sure there's overlap. I doubt they're running out there together. So to me, this is a publicity stunt like everything else they're doing. And I almost kind of feel this picture. It's just, I know I'm being a hater on Kash Patel lately, but the point is that he is, as I say, worthy of ridicule. And these are people that are committing crimes against you and that are selling out America, in my opinion. So I'm not worried about that. But I get the feeling from this that these people are trying not to give my vibe. Am I crazy? Like, does it almost feel like she's starting to turn away from him right there? I think it's obvious that people are feeling this. For the love of God, just arrest somebody. That's where, and we don't care about you giving us PR shots of you running with trainees. We want accountability, not a binder that says accountability, actual accountability. Meanwhile, President Trump has granted a full pardon to Jewish UK billionaire Joe Lewis, who pled guilty to insider trading charges back in 2024. Joe Lewis made his fortune through high-risk currency speculation, including major bets against the British pound on Black Wednesday, and later became the longtime owner of Tottenham Hotspur through his investment group. As Whitney adds some definition to this, Trump just pardoned the Soros pal, yet again. Funny how they're fighting the deep state and Soros and his funding of these things, except he brings Besant into the group, who worked with Soros and still has connections to him, or pardons a Soros guy. You know, this is like pretending you're fighting BlackRock and then have Trump working with BlackRock. This is why I keep pointing out you have people who are lying to you and then everybody else in the conversation. She says, Trump pardoned the Soros pal who broke the Bank of England with Soros and current Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent for a financial crime he pled guilty to. Guilty. So not an innocent thing being accused of something. Pled guilty. Well, I guess you could argue that happens like we just talked about, but the point is that he claimed to be guilty. Lewis is part of what the New York Times once called a currency trading and manipulating cabal that also included Jimmy Goldsmith, arguably Epstein's first major contact in the world of elite finance back in the early 1970s. Epstein, think about doing this now with what's going on with Epstein. It says Epstein was arguably part of this cabal after the New York Times wrote them in the mid-1990s, given the multiple attestations to his abilities in currency stabilization and reverse and currency trading in general. She says, I first wrote about Lewis years ago, 2019, because he has created his own de facto state, El Bolson, Argentina. This is happening more than we realize right now, guys, whether Prospera or these different kind of like new, they're building out where they're growing. Like, think about it like this. I think they're varying degrees or groupings, you know, whether it's Zionism, technocracy, or even more abstract than that, different agendas, but all of them wanting control over your life. And so you have these different technocrat oligarchs sort of trying to build out this weird future, and they sell you on what they want you to think is happening. And this is where it's going. I made the point about Prospera the moment that I saw that, and it's only proved out to be correct. With the same funding, Pronomos Capital around all the freedom cities, the same groups involved with what's going on in Gaza. It's impossible not to connect these dots. And that's an important one that I think you should watch if you haven't seen it. We're going to continue to follow up on this, the Freedom City, startup nation, techno-feudal state they're building. But Pronomos Capital and the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state goes into the funding mechanism behind all of it and how they're all interconnected. Prospero and the technocratic hellscape they're building is literally one of their first freedom cities. They're telling you they're going to build in this country. Not America first, guys. Never been farther from. But, so this guy who just pardoned, tied to Epstein, tied to Israel, basically is building his own place in Argentina, where he has fought out the local government and has his staff regularly threatened to kill, and has nearly succeeded locals if they try and access the public lake his mansion borders. These are the kind of people that Donald Trump pardons. However, according to sources I spoke with, she says, when I traveled there to report about it for Mint Press News, he allows IDF soldiers on vacation in South America to access the lake and his property. They brag about it in local hostels. He also owns an airstrip that the Argentina government oddly has no oversight of what comes in or out, and locals who suggested planes were using it to make suspect trips to the Falkland Islands ended up having their living room shot up. In addition, he is a close business associate of Marcelo Mindelen, who along with Enduro Epstein are the men Soros handpicked to run his Argentine interest until they parted ways a few years ago. Mindelen and Lewis jointly control most of Argentina's power grid, and Epstein is one of the biggest forces in real estate and banking, as well as the host of the Lao Lao Forum, where Argentine business elites meet behind closed doors, like a South American WEF. Epstein and Mindelen are interestingly big Javier Milei backers. Surprise, surprise. Zionism back Zionism. Maybe something to think about, given that a longtime Soros associate now running the Treasury Department wants to use billions in taxpayer funds to keep him afloat. Argentina. It's not America first. It's criminal banker syndicate first. Exactly. I mean, because how can it get any more obvious than this? This is not a good person. This is somebody who is an insider elitist oligarch, a technocrat, a Zionist. Exactly what we're fighting. And people connected to Soros, who the rest of the team sport politics, Nick Sorter, Benny Johnson, they're all fighting the Soros lefties while they're working with the Soros people. Adam points out, in the same vein of conversation, Trump's spiritual advisor, who got arrested a couple months ago, and mega church, it's right here actually, it was October 3rd, so more than a month ago. Mega church pastor and ex-Trump advisor pleads guilty to child sexual abuse. Trump spiritual advisor, here he is getting trotted out. Pastor Robert Morris was sentenced to only 6 months in jail for sexually abusing a 12-year-old. Trump sure does know a lot of pedophiles, he writes. Always seems to get light sentences too. How do you make sense of that? 6 months? I mean, guys, they're charging people who are protesting for more than that. He says, of Tel Aviv Ted was a friend of the pedophile, by the way, of course. Republican who introduced Trump derangement syndrome bill, arrested for soliciting a minor. You saw this one. Minnesota State Senator Justin Eichhorn allegedly travels to meet a 17-year-old that he thought he met online. Here, it's just a compilation, he points out, which is, you've seen all these, and it's not unique to Republicans or Trump, but it's very clearly a government problem here. Republican state representatives indicted for child sexual abuse. January 6th rioter pardoned by Trump faces child sex charges. Former Trump campaign co-chair in Alabama is charged with sex abuse. The reality is this is how the sexual blackmail network works. And the reason so many of them are in government is because that's how they control the government. So it behooves them to keep those people in government because they can use them. They can coerce them. It's more complicated than that, but that's pretty easy to understand. And of course, Tom Alexandrovich, I forgot his last name earlier. This is part of the U.S. government right now, working for Donald Trump. And it says a liberal district attorney and state court judge in Nevada failed to require an alleged child molester to surrender his passport, which allowed him to flee our country. And she says, Chita, say his name and the country he fled to. Tom Alexandrovich escaped to Israel. Explain why local police said the federal government, you, intervened to release him. Also, why you deleted your other account where you posted all your pro-Israel genocidal thoughts. This guy never got charged. He got released back to Israel, and that was it. Right now, as you've got the rapist prison guards making the tours around their public newscasts, literally going from show to show, praising them for being the rapists. He's taking the mask off and everything. You have to understand how alarming this is. And in fact, again, I played this clip randomly earlier just to put it back in your mind. Also the same conversation.
We have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity.
Exactly what Robert was just talking about with the potential designation of the Muslim Brotherhood. And regardless of what you think about the group, the point is how they use these things and the connections around all of it. And in this case, what he just said is actually an example where they then went on to claim anything connected to that was a terrorist organization. And that stemmed all the way into the United States. And what he's talking about is a group that all it stemmed back to was the fact that Israel's government entity got caught raping a child, and they covered it all up and called them terrorists. And so now you can't defend a terrorist organization. That's what Trump and the rest and Biden, that's what they do, guys. Or why Trump says, and people bopping old grandmas on the head. Why? So when you go, but that's unconstitutional. They go, well, you're defending a grandma beater? Well, no, I'm simply pointing out that regardless of what their crime, that's unconstitutional. It's irrelevant, but you see, logic is lost on many partisans today. Now, overlapping this with Epstein, I mean, seriously, almost every single person that I'm seeing talk about this across the board, left and right, has identified the most obvious point, which makes you wonder why they don't think that, they're not trying to make this clear, which is that it seems pretty obvious to me the way this went down that Donald Trump and Bondi are reopening the investigation aimed only at Democrats, which is embarrassing in its own right, and then claiming that because the investigation's ongoing, well, now we can't release the files, right? I mean, but the files that you told us were fake. But now because there's investigation, we have to wait. Sort of like the Thomas Crooks argument. We'll wait for the trial, even though there's not one coming. Just, we're at a point now where you either choose to recognize the obvious or you blind yourself. And I know people that are blinding themselves because they just don't care, blinding themselves because they're afraid to get involved. blinding themselves because they want to support Trump. But I don't think in any way, any stretch of the imagination, that represents the majority of people. See that you are in the majority like you were in COVID-19, whether you're left or right, because you see it. Gen X girl. First of all, this is Trump's post. Now that Democrats are using the Epstein hoax involving Democrats, not Republicans, to try and deflect from their disastrous shutdown and all their other failures, I will be asking Bondi and the Department of Justice, together with our great patriots at the FBI, to investigate Epstein's involvements with specifically people they claim are connected to Democrats. So that's it. Clinton, which I guarantee is connected. I mean, I'm only, excuse me. I bet you every one of them are connected. The point, though, is that all of them are. I mean, in a general sense, I think that's where we are. Whether it's sexual crimes or just some kind of other blackmail, or that they don't want to challenge Israel. I'm seeing here, because the Epstein case is inevitably, without question, connected to Mossad. That's been coming out left and right. Drop Site's been doing great work on it lately. He's saying we're going to focus on them and many other people and institutions to determine what was going on with them, he says. It's another Russia scam. Well, okay, so what are you saying? You're going to investigate to see how they're lying about this, or that you're investigating to see that they're connected to Epstein? I mean, he's literally playing it both ways in one statement. He says, stay tuned. He actually adds, records show that these men and others spent large portions of their life with Epstein on his island. But it's fake, though. It's a hoax. Now, as I've said, you could easily argue what he's saying is it's a hoax, what they're trying to do, and that there's truth to the background. But that's not how they're playing it. Every time he's asked about the whole thing, he goes, it's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's all a hoax. So here's what Emmanuel wrote. One of the earliest to say this that I could see. That's what I was trying to find where this really stemmed back to. And he responds to Gen X Girl. And he says, I hate to be a cynic, but I bet Bondi, apparently before this came out, uses the ongoing investigation excuse now to block the release of the files. Remember, because they've got the last Democrat vote, which they got enough votes to be able to potentially release this coming up in December. The House Oversight Committee released a bunch of emails. But what Massey is trying to do is a vote to release everything. And they finally have enough votes after dragging their feet through the shutdown. And so now, arguably, open the investigation against, like, these things we're aiming at, not everything, and claim that's stopping them from being able to vote on this because it's an ongoing investigation. And he says, and none of the people named will go to jail. And the investigation will start right after they finish the investigation of Seth Rich's laptop. Think about that, guys. That's a left and right thing. And yet, where do we go with that? Assange told you he was killed. Maybe this fight between the Dems and Trump will finally let us see all the fights, she writes. But here's what the response was. Emmanuel makes a great point. What if Trump launches the investigation in order for the DOJ to claim that they can't release the files because of an open investigation? The House is scheduled to vote next week. An overwhelming majority are expected to vote yes, and we'll get that in a second. Republicans everywhere are now saying, whether they're being honest or not, we're going to vote for this when it comes. And it says, if majority vote in the Senate, Trump has to release unless some technicality like an open investigation prevents them, or he just ignores it, which he's been doing. Ignoring court rulings, ignoring congressional, he very well could do that, especially if that's all going to come down around him. But here's what the Patriotic Blonde wrote. And here we go, because that Bondi responds to Trump and says, thank you, Mr. Trump. And guess what? She's going to appoint Jay Clayton as the most capable and trusted prosecutor in the country. And I've asked him to take the lead on the investigation of Democrats connected to Epstein. And she says, as with all matters, the department will pursue this with urgency and integrity to deliver the answers. You mean the same thing you just told us was all fake? I mean, this is pretty damn silly when you really break it down, right? That we're in a position now where these people just got done telling you that it's all over. We gave you everything. Except, nope, now we've got more. Except now it's a hoax. Except now we're going to continue to investigate. They will literally say whatever Trump tells them to say. How embarrassing. And as she writes, and here we are, right on cue, Bondi reopens the Epstein investigation so there can be no publishing of the files. I mean, that's pretty clearly what's happening. So here's how she wrote this down. This is just funny because it's pretty well done. She goes, so today, update on where we are with the Epstein saga. So the DA, now there's a big jump between Epstein supposedly dying and where we are now, but there's a lot to go. The point is today. So DA brings the case, Epstein gets charged, Maxwell gets charged, Epstein gets killed, or whatever actually happened. We say, release the files. Trump says, okay, we'll release the files. Bondi says, yes, sir. Trump says, well, maybe not. Epstein didn't kill himself. Release the jail video. FBI, there is no video. Epstein didn't kill himself. Release the video. FBI, there is no video. Yes, there is. Release the video. FBI says, okay, there's video. But Epstein killed himself. Release it. FBI says, okay, here. We go, hey, it's edited. You're missing pieces. FBI says, that's all you're getting. We say, release the files. Trump says, what files? The Epstein files. Trump says, there are no files. It's a hoax. Massey says, oh, yes, there are. Let's bring it to a vote. FBI, we can't vote on it. An ongoing investigation, which was happening before. Epstein victims, release the files. FBI, nothing to see. Case is closed. FBI, Trump says the files are all a hoax. And then, of course, we also have the shutdown part. We can't do it because of the shutdown. Massey, case is closed. I have the votes to release the files. Trump says, sorry, I can't. I just shut down the government. Oh, I guess it isn't there. Massey says, government's back. Let's vote. Trump says, okay, Bondi, open the investigation, so we can't vote. Massey, F. I mean, this is always the case, guys. You have to be able to acknowledge how insanely embarrassing this is. If you are able to look at any one of these moments and compare it to where we are now, then there's contradiction everywhere. And this is why I always say that I think everyone can see this or have different variations of choosing to be dishonest. Now, Liz Crokin says, President Trump vows his administration will investigate the Epstein associates. See, people like this, and a lot of them that will be critical in certain ways, will come out and go, the moment Trump goes, we're investigating, but only Democrats, they go, yay, we finally get what we're asking for. No, we're not. Maybe some blind partisans on the right. Most of us want the full picture, honest people. And she says, I've been saying for years, not only is President Trump the reason Epstein was arrested, he'll take down his ring, whatever that means. Today, Trump said he will ask his DOJ and FBI to investigate potential Epstein clients. He very clearly aimed it at Democrats. And she says, I said this almost a year ago. Right? So the point is that now that he finally, and this is like I was saying before, about Alex Jones suddenly calling out Israel, you have to go, okay, fine. He's pointing in the right direction, if not halfway. But what about the other year of content and lies and misdirection before that? So in this case, Donald Trump just spent a year trying to cover this up, or more than, varying depending on what we're talking about, or, COVID-19 shots and fake Bill Gates food, all the different lies, right? And then suddenly goes, okay, fine, we'll investigate something. And they go, yay, we're back on track. Well, no, we're not. First of all, if he's now investigating, can't you take a half a step back and go, but then why were you saying there was nothing there? Take another half step back and go, but here you called it a hoax. Take an even further step back and say, you have to acknowledge these were deceptive, dishonest lies. So when they just go, we're back on track, like everyone's starting to try to do, you can't either. You can acknowledge that he might be saying the right thing, but if you're incapable of recognizing he was lying to you the entire time leading up to it, then you're not an honest player. Here, Pam Bondi says, thank you, Mr. President, Jay Clayton, right? Jay Clayton is going to be the guy investigating all of it. Well, let's look into that. Driftless Dissident points out, incredibly curious to point Jay Clayton to head as an investigation, especially considering his links with Fireblocks, which I was investigating today, an Israeli cryptocurrency firm. Apollo Global Management as well, Leon Black and his son's firm, and that's not all. He goes on to point out a whole bunch of connections to Barclays, Goldman Sachs, Bill Ackman's Pershing Square, a whole bunch of things that are concerning for people that are aware of the bigger picture. But I just wanted to highlight that you're picking yet another person who is connected to another company that's tied to the larger technocratic change that was built and run by Unit 8200. The amount of time, it's almost ubiquitous at this point. So just one point to highlight this from an article that's mentioning it, even though it's difficult to get the insight on this. This is an article from, where was the date again? It was somewhat recent. I can't find the date again. I saw it earlier. But it's about these companies in a general sense and the guy building behind one of them called Wiz. But the point they reference, today, many of the world's leading security companies were co-founded by veterans of Unit 8200 and includes Fireblocks. But also this discussion coming from Daily Coin, which points out very clearly, one standout initiative is the MAMRAM blockchain incubator launched by the MAMRAM Alumni Association, which includes over 8,000 veterans of the IDF Central Computing Unit. And it says the incubator collaborates with major blockchain players like Starkware, Fireblocks, Collider VC. And down here it says Israel, the home of the blockchain startup like Fireblocks, is often described as the startup nation. Yep, exactly like we're telling you. And what do they just tell you? How they're infiltrating countries and infiltrating technology all around the world. And this is a company that was built and run by 8200. Now, Jay, who's been appointed to the investigation for Epstein by Bondi, is going to be completely on the up and up about it all, right? Totally not going to pull punches for Israel. Well, I don't know. Maybe he'll be honest. I think the point is, the implication is that he probably won't be because of obvious overlaps, whether it's Trump or the Israel connections or all of it put together. None of them want this to come out. That's what anybody honest is pointing out. Now, one last overlap, as we pointed out in the very beginning, International Cyber Digest, unremovable Israeli spyware found on Samsung devices. Now, don't forget, they have I think it's called zero-click or no-click spyware, meaning you don't even have to open it. They can send you an email, done. You don't even have to click on it. So in this case, now it's not only you have to click on it, you can't even get rid of it. Samsung faces backlash over AppCloud, an Israeli-developed app pre-installed. How do we not all see how crazy this is? Whether it's telemessage in the White House Oval Office inner circle, or apps everywhere, or pager bombs, or any number of alarming overlaps, or the basic conversation point about how they will quite literally tell you that they will infiltrate things around the world. Here is the article they're referencing. Invasive Israeli-founded bloatware is harvesting data from Samsung users. So not only just, well, that's what they're meant to do, harvest and send back information, whether it's the State Department or whether it's random person with their phone. Open letter to Samsung, enforced Israeli-founded bloatware installations in the Wana region.
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
Just a casual admission of a serious crime, manipulating the trade, the supply chain to our favor, or carrying out terrorist attacks, or basically infiltrating global technology. Entire companies. Per investigations revealed the app is embedded in the operating system, preventing full removal. Too late. Do you think they're going to care? Do you think Samsung or the U.S. government's going to no, they're going to ignore it, guys. But it's everywhere you look. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell, attorney, says that staffers at her prison fired after an email was leaked about what's going on. Now, this is another addition to the story, the saga, and this overlaps with Raskin. Is that how you say his name, right? Raskin. Which essentially is that they claim that he broke the law, which is probably the case for all I know, but gave information about the Maxwell emails. Rather the deeper point about what they're letting her do there and a lot of different points, right? And so this has been really problematic for Trump and for the whole story. And so what is their answer, their response? Here's how they framed it from the team sport politics side. Here's a blind MAGA supporter. Democrat Representative Jamie Raskin conspired with prison staff to steal Maxwell's confidential legal emails. Yeah, because we care so much about her, this sexual child predator, which were then passed to him for leaking to the press in a smear campaign against Trump. Okay, X22, did you ever going to get into whether or not it's real? Does it matter whether or not it's true? Or are you just so hell-bent on covering for Trump that you'll say, Democrat did this and we're protecting Maxwell. We're protecting the state and Trump because, and I guess apparently the Epstein files. Funny how things have turned around. These accounts that were so hell-bent, and rightly so, on breaking down the Israel Epstein pedophilia, and now are literally covering for it because Trump. Well, here's what the article says. Maxwell attorney says the staffers at her prison fired after the email was leaked. Of course. Oh, wait, it's right here. There we go. It says attorney for Maxwell has denied that her client is seeking the commuting of her sentence, which is interesting because there's been clear from her own statements that that is something being discussed. So it's a weird pushback now. But so they're claiming that the new information we recently got that she was seeking that right now is not true. I think that's provably false. But it says the Hill was not able to verify whether any Bureau of Prisons employees were fired over the disclosure. They're claiming that's what happened, but they can't verify it. So this could all be some kind of construct to put doubt over what came out. But it says to protect the identity of whistleblowers, this is Raskin, we won't comment on any information that could identify whistleblowers, including whistleblowers' employee status. Right? So is it possible that he manipulated this whole thing into coming? Yeah, of course. I wouldn't doubt that for a second. But it still matters to me, of course it should to everybody, whether or not the emails are true. It's sort of like the overlap with Assange and WikiLeaks, where it became that Russia is trying to trick you with real things. Okay, even if they're tricking you, which is very real to consider, using the truth to manipulate, it happens all the time, it still matters that they're true. And what they were doing was showing you things about our government that they didn't like. It says judiciary Democrats will continue to demand answers and expose the truth as we get to the bottom of the effort to cover up the administration's obscene coddling of a convicted sexual trafficker and abuser. Of course, they're big and mighty when they're the ones pointing the finger, right? Raskin's team disputed that it had violated any attorney-client privilege, with a House Judiciary Democrat spokesman saying that the Trulix email system used a BOP facilities requires them to consent to monitoring and information for retrieval for law enforcement and other purposes. I have no expectation of privacy as to my communication on the information stored. So pretty easy to look up. So what you have is a bunch of people trying to make this about the crime is showing you the thing because they're trying to trick you. Don't even look, right? Hashtag don't look up, right? Don't pay attention to what's in front of you. And ultimately seems to be something that you can clearly show is something, but when this flushes out, if there was an illegal action taken, then he should be held accountable for that. At the same time, it should not invalidate whether or not these things are actually true. But cutting to the chase, here is what Misty points out, which is what I very clearly agree with. These people are, I'll play the clip for you of Glenn Beck. She says, these people are so effing stupid. Democrats won't release them because Democrats are in them. Republicans won't release them because Republicans are also in them, which means they'll both just tinker around the edges or pretending to give an SHIT when in reality they're all creeps and pedophiles. Now, whether you think it's absolute or not, the point is has to be considered. This is what Glenn Beck is going to do right here, which is really, really lazy to me. I mean, I don't think they're either like any of these people doing this are necessarily that stupid. They very well know that it's not all or nothing in any context for the most part. And so, as always, when he goes, if the Democrats had it, they didn't release it. So that means they're, clearly the obvious point could be that they're also potentially, being exposed. That's one of the most obvious points in all of this, that government can be infiltrated, as we've talked about, even with the deep state, whatever you want to call that, or Israel. The argument that they would only go after one part of the government to control the whole government is the dumbest thing in the room. So here, Glenn Beck is trying to keep you distracted into thinking that it's the Democrats that are responsible because they would have done this then if they had it then, kind of a thing. Here's what Glenn said. Now, I want you to think about the larger point, that clearly the possibility that they're all guilty, what would they do in that circumstance? Well, I would argue in most cases, probably just trying to ignore it. But because all of us are so hell-bent on this very topic that now they have to let you feel like something's changing. And so that's what she's pointing at. Now, there's personal things in this too, I argue, where the game is to try to throw a bomb at Trump, knowing that he can't call it out because he's in there too, or however they view it, but give you something. And then so Trump initiates the investigation to pluck out something about Democrats and throw it back. If they keep pushing, I think it's going to come out about all of them. And so I think all of them at some point are going to go, we have to stop this. You can decide for yourself, but you know as well as I, that's a very obviously logical possibility. But here's what Glenn Beck broke down for you.
Why are they trying to cover up that Donald Trump had sex with children? I mean, it's as clear as day in the email. Let me
see that kind of coverage, right? Like, yeah, just so clear. It's like, yeah, very intelligent, well thought of. Like they're just trying to, poo-poo on it. Like they're stupid for thinking that. Not an argument, right? The overarching point to start with is that Trump's and screwing children. Well, is anybody actually arguing that who's being honest about this? Do we, you could argue it's possible, sure. But on top of that, there's many different overlaps to this. It could be any number of weird sexual crimes or nothing, or trafficking, or seeing it, allowing it, not doing anything about it, or that he's just there and doesn't want to be associated with it, even though he committed no crime. See, that's called nuance, Glenn, which I know you know. And this is about trying to make it seem stupid and hyperbolic. So you go, oh, well, that's dumb. So ignore the whole thing. That's a very classic propaganda tactic. They know what they're doing, guys.
Read that Donald Trump had sex with children. I mean, it's as clear as day in the email. Let me read.
It actually is, by the way. Not that he slept with children, but that what he's about to show you is the one that's the anomaly. All the rest, as now come out, by the way, shows you that there was more going on. That at very least that he was, as Epstein said, knew about the girls.
What Jeffrey Epstein wrote. I want you to realize that the dog who hasn't barked is Trump. Victim, redacted, spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. New information just...
How lazy is this, right? So this is one example. What you have, by the way, is a whole track record of Maxwell, of Epstein, on different occasions, making it very clear that Trump was in some way implicated. Now, they could be lying about that too. As objective people, we can consider that. But you can't point to the one anomaly, which, I mean, even with Maxwell, that he never said a word, or Trump never did anything wrong. Well, even she said otherwise before. So is she lying then or is she lying now? It seems like she has far more interest in lying now with what she might gain for doing so. But we have to be objective about it. But I'm just trying to point out how dishonest it is for him to start out by going, it's just so clear, and then make a half-hearted, one-sided, narrow argument to sell you on the idea that this is only them. It's only Democrats.
Released, or is it? Because in 2011, that was released and everybody knew.
Oh, so totally old then, that we all knew about. The new stuff is what's showing you the difference.
But it's been out floating around. Here's the change. I want you to realize the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Virginia spent hours at my house with him. Why would you redact a name that is already out in the public square? Well,
yeah, you might want to ask Donald Trump's administration, bud, because that's what they're doing right now for the entire thing. Funny how you don't piece that jigsaw puzzle together. The point is they're going victims. Well, all the victims are standing there that we know of that are like the ones that they're proclaiming, saying, we don't care. Now, yes, it's possible that there are victims in there that don't want to be named. Okay, then pull those aside and give us everything else. They're not giving you anything about the 20 different people that stood up there and said, we don't care. Release the information. Our names are in there. We want it to be released. But this is all they can make a point about, because this guy will die hard for Trump, will pull every punch for Trump. He's showing you that over his entire career.
Because it makes it all suddenly new and shiny. You see victim and you're like, oh, there's a victim that who was the victim? But when you know it's Virginia, you know this is already gone to court.
What does that change in the first place? Right, so you're trying to suggest that by redacting that, even though the point of their names being redacted is to respect the privacy of the victims, exactly what you're claiming today, whether you think it's justified or not, but by redacting it, you're making it seem like some new and spicy thing we don't know about. I mean, this is a reach. Hey, you could argue there's logic to it, but of course, then when you stand back and look at every other piece of the story, changes it, doesn't it?
She already testified about this. And I'm quoting, this is from the testimony. He didn't partake in any of this, any sex with any of it. It's true. This is
the one person. Oh, well, then it's all done then, right? This one person said that, then it can't be anywhere else, right? Despite Trump's very clear historical track record outside of this, of being any number of, you can call it a philanderer, whatever you want to call it. Like the idea of him acting that way, whether a persona or not, I don't know. I'm not going to, you could criticize or not. It's up to you. Things he said on shows or things he said with Stern. Like, it shows you that there's a level of that. What he's doing here is dishonest.
Didn't partake in any of this, any sex with any of it. It's true. This is not new news. If you remember when the shutdown first started, what did the Democrats say the reason why they did the shutdown? Why Mike Johnson and everybody else wouldn't negotiate? Because the heat was on to release the Epstein files, and they didn't want to have to do that, so they shut the government down. So The government is open. And what does Mike Johnson do yesterday? He said the House is going to vote on a bill to release.
Do you realize how embarrassingly dishonest this is? Like, his audience is either that completely out of the know about basic fundamental things that are happening, or he thinks you're that stupid. Are we really going to pretend like Massey hasn't been fighting for this the whole time and Johnson's been doing everything he can to keep it from happening? And now that they've reopened the investigation, now it's not going to matter anyway? Or the fact that he has been lying to you every step of the way? Or that, I mean, every one of these points is selectively plucked out. This is what cherry picking looks like.
All of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein next week. Good, Mike. Release all of it.
Okay, so when that doesn't happen, or when Mike inevitably lies yet again, or going back before all this, when you all called him a rhino that it would never be there, like, you know, that disjointed the point, but put that first. That they will, oh, he's a rhino, he sucks. Oh, now he's on our team, he's the best. But when he inevitably lies again, or doesn't do what he's saying, how much you want to bet that this guy doesn't say a word about that?
If anybody thinks that you're ever going to get the truth on this in the first place, it's madness. It was in the hands of the Democrats for the longest time. You don't think it was all picked through? And if there was anything about...
Oh, okay. So your blind self-serving assumption is that they've deleted all the things? Are you serious? Okay, so then what's Trump doing right now? What's with all the information that we already know is there that Massey wants to show, but they won't let him? Like, this is going to blow up in his face, this blind effort to defend the one side. The idea, as we started with, that you're going to argue that this somehow, that because they had it and didn't show anything, that therefore that proves anything other than they're all possibly complicit. It's the lowest common denominator.
Out Donald Trump, you don't think that would have come up between 2020 and 2024? There's nothing in there about Donald Trump.
Except there is, and we all know it now. Like, this is embarrassing for you, man, and I hope it gets even more embarrassing. These people are hell-bent on keeping the two-party illusion going, desperate to keep their gravy train rolling. It's all about the other side. It's just, I mean, it truly is childish today. Like, as much as I think that not everyone's where I see it, I have a really hard time taking anybody seriously who is a diehard, blind supporter of a partisan side. It's like I'm dealing with kindergartners, and I'm sorry to say that. It is insane. I'm just hoping that is starting to just look. You know it. You're not stupid. If you are pulling punches, if you're taking it at one side, or they're all the bad things and we're all the good things, we're not in kindergarten, guys. We're not children. That's insanely binary. It's always more than that. And truthfully, the point is, it's all of it. All right. That's the point about the Epstein files in general that I think we can prove. Alex rightly points out, it gets proven true over and over, but the fact that you can see Epstein advising elites on both sides of the aisle in these emails that Glenn Beck pretends aren't there should give you away the game. A little peek behind the curtain, and the game being that it's all of it, and it's Israel. He says, this is Sean Morrow saying, Jeffrey Epstein advised Stephen Bannon that the lawyers representing Brett Kavanaugh in his confirmation hearing should accuse Christy Blasey Ford of being on medications that cause false memories or memory loss. Jeffrey Epstein speaking with Bannon, right? See how interconnected all of this is? Now, this next clip is going to blow you probably already seen it, but if you haven't, it's very important to understand. So this is just a glimpse of, there's right now, I think I even have it right here. There is a website boasting anyway, like somebody shared this. I haven't confirmed this for myself, but there's some of these going around. They're simply saying like, here is a search database of Epstein files. As always, be skeptical. You don't know, maybe this is an effort to hide certain things, but either way, I'll include that in case you want to go through some of this. But you're getting some of these emails that is fleshing out the picture of a complete government manipulated by sexual blackmail, and we know what that stems back to. So here, Decentered News, according to the Washington Post, Stacey Plaskin appears to have been texting with Jeffrey Epstein during a 2019 hearing. Here's the part of the video where they matched up the texts, which were sent in Pacific time, with the video. So what this is, according to the Washington Post, is in 2019, you had Stacey Plaskin in a hearing, and as it's going on, she's being directly texted by Jeffrey Epstein, who then influences the questions that she asks. I've never seen a better example of how this has influenced, whether she's being blackmailed or not, or just thinks that he's an insider that gives her good advice. It has influenced our government, guys, and it's on both sides of the paradigm. That's what this shows. That's what the Trump overlap shows. That's what any number of different points have continued to show, that people like Glenn and the others are trying their best to keep you looking away from. Now, this is much more impactful out on a video. So if you're watching the podcast, take the time afterward to find this clip, and it's all chronological, and check this out. But even listening to it won't give you the full gist. There's a typed out text messaging going on beneath the video. So that's the point, is the typed out below is what's being texted between her and Jeffrey while this is going on.
When Barack Obama was president of the United States, and while we were once driving through a struggling neighborhood in Chicago, he commented that only black people could live that way. Attorney-client privilege, yes, I will turn it over.
You, as my friend Mr. Meadows pointed out, misled this.
I will say this one says Michael Cohen brought up Rona, which is the name of somebody, keeper of the secrets. That's what Jeffrey Epstein texted to her in the middle of this congressional hearing.
Committee even today in a written submission that contradicted your testimony.
She writes, Rona?
You suggested you were going to review that. Are you going to review it in our next break to correct the record, yes or no?
Yes.
And it says,
question, you
I'm up
helped out
next.
the president's campaign.
Right, so she's going, quick, tell me, who's that? I'm up next. Hurry, Jeffrey Epstein, tell me what to say.
Or were involved in the campaign as a representative, as a spokesman, even in your words
He
today.
said that's
was your
his
idea
assistant, Jeffrey Epstein
for
writes.
the campaign dating back to 2011. Is that accurate, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Weisenberg and other individuals, Ms. Rona. Who are those individuals? Are they with the Trump organization?
They
and
are.
Are there other people that we should be meeting with?
So Alan Weisselberg is the chief financial officer.
Uh-huh.
The
You got to
Trump
quickly give us
organization.
as many names as you can so we can get to them.
Yes, ma'am.
As Ms. Rona, what is Ms. Rona's position?
Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his.
And Jeffrey writes, good work. So think about that. That either means that he's in the room or he is somehow getting direct feed to what's happening. I mean, this is just absolutely insane. Guiding exactly question. I mean, this is over. I mean, you have to think about this in more than just, like it could very well be that she feels like this person's giving her good insight, whatever it is. But this is government officials in real time being driven to ask certain questions by Jeffrey Epstein. And interestingly, about a person who works with Trump. And so you could see this as multiple things. I think it's about whatever you think. I think it's Israel's intelligence apparatus, but whatever you think it is, trying to benefit from this. And that's not about one side or the other. It's about trying to control the policy of this country. And so this seems to be throwing a little bit towards Trump, which then like people even just recently talked about that some of these recent actions were trying to threaten Trump back into line by the Israeli apparatus. I mean, that's not hard to think about. Yeah, that's it. This just blows my mind. Not that it's surprising. I mean, we've been calling this out for a long time, but it's still wild. And it says, update, after initially declining to answer questions about the text messages, Plaskin has now reportedly issued a statement confirming that she was indeed texting with Epstein during the hearing. I didn't see this. I just post this afterward. Newly released documents from the convicted sex offender. Archive as always. That's why they're trying to bring this down, because nobody, nobody should be paying for any of this stuff anymore. Epstein texted with House Democrats during Cohen hearing, documents show. Newly released document. Of course, now what you're going to get is people trying to make this about, see, it's only Democrats. No, it's both, guys. That's the point. This should be very clear. Trump was his best friend for 10 years. Well, first of all, Trump was a Democrat, by the way, but you can point this connection out on either side for a very, very, read Whitney's books to understand the real breadth that goes well beyond the U.S. government. Newly released documents show that the convicted sex offender texted with Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands during a congressional hearing, and that those text messages may have influenced her questions of Cohen. It clearly did. And it says in the text, Epstein appeared to be watching the February 19 hearing in real time. It's wild. I'm going to have to go through this more. I'm sure there's more in here to check out. But yeah, I'll include this. Oh, and that's the clip I played in the beginning. Just with all that we're talking about, the clip of Kash Patel in the beginning, resisting to say whether or not he brought this up with Trump. You know that he did. That's come out publicly. But just they're dragging their feet in every way. But the good news is we have some files that came out, guys. The Einhart files, right? So Gabbard comes out and says, beginning today, records related to Amelia Earnhardt, or is it Einhart or Earnhardt? Amelia Earnhardt. Earnhardt. That's weird. Suddenly just sounds wrong on my mind. Anyway, you know, the one that just apparently went missing, circumnavigating the world, disappeared 88 years ago. Well, okay, that means interesting. I mean, but it's just such an obvious deviation. And as Justin Nash points out, good news, everyone. They're finally releasing the files everyone's been demanding, the Earnhardt files. You know, it's just, I think it's, I mean, even with an E, it's meant to sort of like distract, I guess. But my thing is, it's like, who is actually asking about this? That's what this person says too. Can someone smarter than me tell me why this would have been classified in the first place? Is a good question. Well, you could argue it's because there's some weird story behind it, but they're just trying to tap into like this inherently conspiratorial mindset. I don't mean that in a bad way, like that there was some kind of a cover up, but it's so far in the past that it'll be interesting. It might be relevant, but it's distractionary. And he says also, why is it so important to have this information now? 0 people were talking about this. Like Trump even mentioned this in a previous conversation, but I don't know of anybody demanding these files. But we're winning. And just to wrap up, guys, you might have seen the push against Marjorie Taylor Greene, who you know my opinions of, politician. I think they're all potentially manipulative, you know, using what they can. But I'm glad to see her call these certain things out about Israel. And now Trump has gone after her. Cynthia Holt says President Trump is always watching. When he gives you his support, all he asks is loyalty. These people don't even realize why they are lost. Loyalty. See, again, I'll cite Theodore Roosevelt. It's an important quote because it's a Republican. And he says, to announce that there must be no criticism of the president or that we are to stand by the president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, it's morally treasonable to the American people. Think about what that means. Servile, having or showing an excessive willingness to serve or please others. You are bowing to the state. It's unpatriotic, servile, morally treasonable to the American public. Not just because he said so, because it is. Blind loyalty to a politician is the absolute opposite of what we pretend this country is. But she's saying, how dare you not support Trump? What if she disagrees? So what you're saying is, even if she has a different opinion, like genuinely disagrees, but still supports the agenda, that she's supposed to just lie? Yes. Cat Turd, Johnson, all of them, you're supposed to just lie. Don't counter signal the leader. These are statements that they have made. And she says, I fully approve of her being primaried. Why? Because she says, well, because Trump says Trump pulled the support because he's calling her Marjorie Taylor Brown because she's rotting like brown grass. Like, it's just such a child, man. Like, it's childish calling people losers and, you know, like no decorum. You can speak and act however you want, but we have every right, just like you would say in other contexts, to make fun of how stupid and ignorant you're being. The point, though, is that she is simply just not supporting blindly whatever Trump puts forward. She wants the Epstein files out. She's calling out Israel. She criticizes certain things. She's acknowledging prices are going up. And so the truth, hate her for it. That's this America first, to have loyalty to the liar. It's very, very sad. Well, Glenn Greenwald says it's hard not to notice that the 2 GOP House members whom Trump is targeting for destruction are the 2 who have most vocally opposed the financing of Israel. I agree. I think that's one of the most important points for why it's happening. But it is more than that. And it says, and that he's using Miriam Adelson and other pro-Israel billionaires to do so. Sarah Higdon, in regard to Trump's post, says this man is insane. And this is what's important. Same with plenty of these people that are, you know, you're getting the larger manipulators online trying to act like these are fake accounts or never really Republicans because they're saying this. The truth is, as everyone's starting to recognize that I myself has been calling out for a year, is that people are starting to see through it. I mean, diehard supporters. He says this man's insane. I voted for him, but he's gone too far. Or he's too far gone. Attacking Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been nothing but loyal to him, which in earnest she has been, other than simply disagreeing on certain policy points. And now this just gross attack on Massey, he's lost it. I mean, the man with multiple wives is trying to attack the man who lost the love of his life for remarrying after her tragic death. Insane. She is. Get married already. Like, this is just a disgusting attack on somebody for baseless, shameless things because he is calling you out. Marjorie Taylor Greene says President Trump just attacked me and lied about me. I haven't called him at all, but I did send these text messages today. Apparently, this is what sent him over the edge. The messages simply said, check the flight logs of Epstein. Or no, this one was, where was it? I think this is the one that got sent to her. Oh, and then she just said, he said Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And every single interview, she says, I have demanded President. I mean, the bottom line is whether they seem to be different. She posted these, and she's claiming that says DJT, meaning Donald J. Trump. The simple point is that this is about Epstein, and what she's claiming is that's what sent Trump flying off the edge, which makes sense to me. And he says, and of course, he's coming after me hard to make an example to scare all other Republicans before next week's vote to release the Epstein files. Now, that is, unless they claim it's an ongoing investigation, which it now is, and claim that means they can't do it. That's what I think is coming too. And she says, I supported him, but I do not worship or serve Donald Trump. And she supported him. She has. I worship God, Jesus is my savior, and I serve my district and the American people. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it's absolutely the right thing to say. You will get more support than you ever dreamed of right now from most of the American people if you take that line. And maybe she means it. I'm going to hope for that. But it's going to be a hard sell, as you know, for me. Probably the rest of my life. It's going to be a hard time for me to ever support a politician. But Evan Kilgore comes out and says Donald Trump just attacked Massey for getting remarried recently after his wife tragically passed away. Then he uses as an attack to attack Massey to imply he's going to lose the next election. David Icke says, and the point was he's done. This is disgusting. Trump has lost me, he says. David Icke says another American nationalist abandons Trump as reality dawns. 5 times August addresses it and says, and with that, he has now spent more time attacking Massey simply for getting married than he has Fauci for killing your grandmother or Epstein for trafficking young girls. This is why it's losing, guys. Nobody can deny that. Anybody honest is going to go, absolutely right. Jimmy Dore says Trump in less than 10 months has already smashed his own movement by putting Israel first, covering for Epstein pedos, covering up for Charlie Kirk's assassination, covering up the Charlie Kirk assassination for them, bombing 2 different countries for them, censoring Americans for them, deporting college students for them, continuing to fund a genocide for them while bailing out Argentina, implementing DEI for them. That is exactly the case, by the way, as always, the same thing in a different way about anti-Semitism, about Israel, plus exploding the deficit while cutting healthcare and adding $200 billion for the war machine, which wiped out all Doge savings, which, by the way, if we all honest with ourselves, wasn't really there in the first place. Now he turns on Massey and Marjorie, who are actually supporting the platform Trump ran on. He says, I wonder what J.D. Vance is thinking, probably greedily looking forward to the future, guys. We have to see what this is. Now, Robert Barnes comes out and says this, and this is in regard to Massey, but also just the lies about grocery prices, which everyone honest can see. He says the predictable response when you pretend the economy is in the golden era, which it's not, and that the cost of living has gone down, which it hasn't, while attacking Marjorie Taylor Greene as out of touch for pointing out the truth. He says it's Trump that is badly out of touch, and his seal-clapping sycophants make it worse. This is a guy who's been pretty bluntly supporting him for a long time. I just think that's interesting. Even people that are constant supporters are starting to recognize it or finally finding the courage to call it out. Chris Martinson. So Donald Trump says, now the Democrats are using the hoax. Now we're going to investigate their connections, basically, right? So it's clear that this was a half-hearted effort. That's not, okay, fine, we're going to release it all. It's okay, I get the game. We're going to start doing our own thing. Well, it's almost blatantly dishonest. But he says, now we're talking. Let's get to the very bottom of the Epstein case and every chip fall where it may. Well, I agree with the sentiment. The sad thing is, even if you play it like, well, they'll expose the right, they'll expose the left, it never comes to the picture like that. That's like pretending Fox and CNN together give you the full picture. It's not the truth, guys. It's absolutely guaranteed not to be the truth. This is a game. I mean, I share his hope. I hope that's what's going to happen. But what he's doing shouldn't be praised. Trump is throwing a bone, hoping that you bite at it and take away, don't go for the full picture, right? Well, Barnes did the same thing. Says Trump says DOJ to investigate Bill Clinton, which I hope that happens. I hope they actually go to jail. But they've had that opportunity for the entire time he's been in power, since last administration. And he said, no, the Clintons are good people. He did. Robert Barnes says this was always the correct path. Full disclosure. That's not what he just said, though. Epstein files is the way. I agree, but that's not what Trump said. And that's what Tim's here said. Oh, no, you're a lawyer. This is what you glean from this? It's hope. It's wishful thinking. What I'm trying to point out here is that people, given the opportunity, will bite at anything that allows them to think that Trump is the guy they wanted, even though his last 11 months have proven to you he's not. But they'll pretend that the action that ends it is the one that makes it all come together, as evidence right there. Because you can't pretend what he just said is in any way full disclosure. Come on, guys. We got to be better than this. Now, I'll end with one of these clips, include the long thread of Trump blindly supporting Israel at your expense and how all that connects to exactly what we're talking about. But I'll leave it there to end, guys. I appreciate you tuning in today. Thank you for the support. The platform couldn't exist without you. So let us know how much it means to you. Let us know what you think we should be doing. Reach out, whether on the line in the office, email, direct message, whatever it is. Let us know. Write us a letter because the actual mailbox is right down there in the information. Send me words of encouragement. Send me what you're thinking. Tell me what you think we should be investigating. If you want to support us through mail, send us a check in the mail. Send us $1 in the mail. It's that kind of communication that's going to continue to be important. But we can't do this without you. So thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
President, the United States will once again stand shoulder to shoulder with the state of Israel. I will support Israel's right to win its war on terror, and we will win fast. You have to win, and you have to win fast. When I'm president, we will deport the foreign jihad sympathizers and Hamas supporters from our midst. We don't want them in our midst. And I will